and we can stop this at any point. So we've been looking at the input phase, the elaboration output, just to sum up, and we're looking at on page 4 of our notes how we've got the strengths of them on one side and then where it becomes dysfunctional on the other side. And we've just looked at the input level, the input stage, and we're saying that this is the kind of thing, those 8 points are the kind of, when you've got a cognitive curriculum, that the teaching would focus upon. Okay, we said that the well-developed ability to conserve constancies is in something where you're saying that there is a rule, there is something that will be applicable wherever you go with this. That's the rule. Now I'm trying to think, what would the constancies be when I'm looking at poetry, for example? The rules of poetry, I might have to explain that, you know, there's a format, this is the kind of sonnet rather than any other kind of poem, and these are the rules of what you'd be, and this is why it's laid out in that format. You know, that kind of thing that you would do. All we're saying there is that you're not going to just sort of very, very quickly put something down in front of children, especially if they are weaker learners. You really must consider all of those functions that are required for the child to grasp what you're on about, what you mean.
So is that where the page 5 in the orientation of space comes in? Do you remember I was asking about that at the start? Like, that's on page 5, so you've done a good few pages before that, so you're getting them into the thinking that this is how it's done. This is not the rules of how you do it, but these are the steps. Now this is something that's completely different, but you're still going to use all the things that you learned, and I suppose that in your input stage that I put across, and you're just going to apply that to page 5.
Absolutely. And remember that page 5 I would do orally. It's talking. And you can have them use arrows and things if you want to, but usually that I would do that one just orally. They describe in their own words what they're totally right there, that, you know, they're revising, reviewing everything we've done up to now.
Okay.
Understanding of that now. One other thing on there, spatial and temporal concepts, well-developed understanding of spatial concepts and temporal concepts. What would that mean at the input stage? What are you trying to communicate to the kids if you need to be aware of temporal and spatial concepts? You're trying to think of a lesson, aren't you? And things you would have taught, and where does space come and time come into that? You see, temporal and spatial concepts will come in to every single lesson. In that, what you'll be doing, you'll be explaining that, you know, we have a certain amount of time now to do this, explaining that at the beginning. We have to get the following done in that amount of time. It's awareness of time. And then whenever I give you a task to do, there'll be a certain amount of time you'll need in order to do it. Spatial concept, awareness of space. In some subjects, in some work, you would need an awareness of space, and others you might not. Okay. Now, just to sort of give us an idea of that, if you turn over to page 5, where you've got matching the dysfunctions, okay, at the input stage, you have got 8 examples on the left-hand side there of some evidence of dysfunctioning at the input. And on the right-hand side, you have the cognitive functions. And the idea is that you would try to match them up. So, for example, responds prematurely to the first and most obvious stimulus and lacks the self-control to approach a task systematically. Scan down the cognitive functions on the right side and see, can you work out what's going on there? responds prematurely to the first and most obvious stimulus and lacks the self-control to approach the task systematically. Which one do you think it is?
Impulsivity.
Impulsivity. Yeah. Okay. Now, just let's take a stand there now. Supposing he does that all the time. And I mean, I can see impulsive. It's one of the easiest ones, straight off with kids. That's the way he operates. What am I going to do about it? If it's a consistent and, constant present way of behaving, impulsive responding is a cognitive dysfunction. So our organization of DOTS is meant to really do something about that, isn't it? It's one of the most important instruments for it, although others do as well. So looking at analytic perception as well, you'll find that if he doesn't, take time to systematically search and pay attention, what was required of him and so on, he'll not sort it out. Okay, so lacks self-control to approach a task systematically. What about the second one? Has difficulty understanding instructions that have been communicated orally.
Poor verbal skills?
Poor verbal skills, yeah. So has difficulty understanding instructions that have been communicated orally. How will I know? I'm always at that because, you vaguely know and then you're not sure if what the kid's doing. I will only know if he hasn't fully understood my instructions by questioning at the input stage. Especially weaker kids. Now, if I'm working in a big fancy grammar school and they're all highfalutin children and they're doing well, look, let's move on. I won't need to do that. But with kids who are not, who are weaker and functioning at a low, I would need to check that he's understood the vocabulary, he's understood the sentence that I've spoken to them. I don't want to drag this down too much so it bores everybody and so forth. But I do need to be a good teacher who will check that kind of thing. I need to know in advance what is going to puzzle them. What are they going to find a bit challenging? And I need to check, I remember a P5 class one time, and all the group of them I had didn't understand the word accidentally. No, looking for words I didn't understand. This kid said, oh, I don't understand that word there. And this is a big long word. And I thought, oh, well, what is that word? And then they went accidentally, right. So what does accidentally mean? They didn't know what accidentally meant. Now, I would have assumed they would have. Now, what I didn't understand was, do they not just have the language to explain to me in their own words what accidentally meant? And it was poor verbal tools, obviously, to put it into this sort of language. But I assume too much, especially with the weaker learner. And that's why you get this sort of muddled output at the end. Number 3, has difficulty following a study timetable. What would you say that one was?
That be poor temporal awareness?
That would be temporal awareness, yeah. Have you ever found that they're not sure how to? You see, I think with the study timetable, it's not aware of the time, concept, but also spatial. Because number 4 has difficulty arranging the 10s and 1s into the proper columns. That's E. Spatial awareness, F. Has the 10s and 1s into the proper columns. Wouldn't that be impaired spatial awareness? Would you agree with that?
Yep.
That's and I'm not saying this is easy to get your head around. It isn't, but it's and I don't think you need to get it sort of flippantly rolling off your tongue. But you do need to be aware of the kinds of difficulties they can be having at various stages. So go for F for that one. Does not take time to focus clearly on all the necessary and relevant details.
Is that around need for precision?
That's a need for precision. Yeah, I would go for E there. Does not take time to focus clearly on all the necessary and relevant details. That's doesn't see a need for precision. See that? Does that make sense? I've got an offer penny. It's not working right. All right. Has difficulty considering all the alternatives of a multiple choice question.
Impaired ability to use more than one source of information.
Correct. Number A. Again, think to that. You'll have had kids who are doing multiple choice, and it's just really astonishing sometimes when you see what they go for. And you think, well, they just see that was the first thing that he saw, or what? He didn't explore all of them, all of the sources of information. Can I perceive that a square rotated on its axis is still a square?
Impaired conservation of constancy.
That's the one. Number B. So when you turn the thing around or when you do the dots, he doesn't realize it's still the same thing. Uses approximations and distortions and distorts certain dimensions when answering. Uses approximations and distorts certain dimensions when answering.
This is a tricky one, and it can be a lot of things.
You're right.
Because we only have blurred and sweeping perception left, it makes me think that we didn't assign the correct letter to one of the previous ones.
Yes, but then could that one be impaired spatial awareness?
Yeah.
Uses approximations to distort certain dimensions when answering.
Yeah. Spatial
awareness. Yeah. What did we give blurred and sweeping perception to? Number C was does not take time to focus clearly on the lesson. That's E. Blurred and sweeping perception. Which one was that?
We didn't use that one.
Well, could it not still work for number 8? As in,
yeah.
Approximations is a kind of blurred thing, isn't it? You kind of, it's this, and then distort certain dimensions.
Blurred and sweeping in fact, blurred and sweeping perception is one of those where really it applies to all of them, to my mind, you know. So, for example, if he's poor verbal skills, but he also, you know, doesn't really, one's blocking the other, blurred and sweeping perception can be affecting both of them there, and blurred and sweeping perception. Okay, now time check. It's just gone nearly, it's nearly 20 past 10 now. You see the other two, elaboration and output. What I think what we just do is, at the elaboration, let's just read down elaboration, the left side and the right side. So you've got the strengths and then the weaknesses. So this is when he's allegedly let go and now working. And the worst thing is of them working on their own. If they're even working together, it's a bit better. So these are what you're supposed to have as cognition when you're working through your task. The thing's been set for you. And think of it this way as well. It could be, I've read a recipe. And the recipe, I've read it all down. And if I'm a good thinker, I will have read it all down and I will have made my preparations for carrying out the recipe, okay? And doing it all. So I read it all down and carefully looking at what the name of the item is and so on, read it down. Then I look at all the ingredients and stuff I'm going to need. I've all that prepared at the input stage. Now I have to carry out the instructions of the recipe. Let's see if any of these would apply, and it'll be a far stretch on some of them. But think of any task you set yourself to do. It's not just the academic in school. It can be anything else as well. Fixing a car engine, so I'm now trying to, sort it out. Read down these cognitive strengths then. Read them down. Now, now we're just going to look at them. Look at the student who at the elaboration stage on page 5. And you'll see the kinds of things now they're matched. I've done it, but we mightn't have time now today to do it together. Look at these, the student who. And these are the behaviors you'll see at the elaboration stage that indicate poor function. Now, just to get an overview of those without even matching them up to the right-hand side, does that give you a general overview picture of what it's like when a learner goes to do something, when you go to actually do? Now, let's be clear about this. In every task that you do, you may not actually be required to use all of those cognitive functions. Would that not be right? Yeah, it would be in certain situations, you would. So, but in general, it's the kind of behavior linked to the kind of cognitive dysfunction. Now, in order to get an overview, just have a look at the behaviors under the output stage, which is on the next page. There are 7 of those. It's not ringing true as when they try to give the answer, the worked out what it's supposed to do now. They've been told what to do, they've been shown what to do, they've now been trying to do it, and now they go to do it. Right? Okay, what I think I'll do here is do a couple of these. Make silly mistakes, for example, adds instead of subtracts. I would say that's number D. Imprecision with data output. Can't respond empathetically to see things from another's point of view. Egocentric communication. Has difficulty planning ahead and working systematically. I've put poor trial and error responses for that one. Number 4, draws a triangle from the model, which is a square. Draws a triangle rather than a square. That's F. Paired visual transport. Has difficulty explaining his or her answers. G. It's an easy one, poor expressive language. Tears up his or her answer sheet. B. Blocking. And rushes through responses without checking. A. You see those? Does that make sense? Okay. I think it's useful when you see examples of the behavior and then link it to the cognitive function. Now, if somebody were to say to you, and what will I do with all of that, about all of that, the straight, simple answer would be, let's do some IE with them.
Mhm.
Because IE will address all of those behaviors. Okay. Do you want to sort of, will I give you what I think are the answers to the elaboration? And then you can check them again afterwards. So continually ask what to do after the task has been explained. I think that's a narrow mental field, F. Relates a story about his or her dog when the discussion is about something else, D. An inability to select relevant cues. Seeks confirmation that he or she has copied correctly despite having the original in front of her. C. Has difficulty finding ways to test assumptions. Impaired hypothetical thinking, number E. Does not concern him or herself with the how many of things, that is the whole lot of the event. Lack of spontaneous comparative behavior. Is unable to apply existing rules in new situations. The new situations. I think I haven't got put it. No, sorry. It was a G of lack of spontaneous comparative behavior is that one. Is unable to apply existing rules in new situations. It's G. I'll have to come back to number 5. What do you think number 5 is then? Does not concern him or herself with the how many of things. That is the totality of the event.
Impaired need for summative behavior, maybe?
Yes, that's I think the only one there that would fit that one. B. And is unable to apply existing rules in new situations is G. Relies on concrete stimuli to solve problems because he or she is unable to do it in his or her head. C. Internalization. Can't do it in his head. Views objects and events as isolated and unrelated entities. H. An episodic grasp of reality. Is satisfied with and gives just because answers. B. An impaired need for summative behavior. Intent cannot delay gratification or invest in long-term planning. A. Cannot predict outcomes using if or then. L. Inferential thinking. And fails to use relevant information learned in the past to solve a present in the future. K. Inability to project virtual relationships. Very, very complex, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very complex. Now, as psychologists, I would say that there's descriptive language there that would be very useful for a psychologist to use. Now, simplifying it, if you like, in a way. And I wonder if doing your waist and your whisk and so on would allow you to come up with these descriptions of the cognitive dysfunctions. But it's sort of worth thinking about, and as a psychologist, when you do dynamic assessment, you'll definitely be able to see it. Not when you're doing the whisk, I wouldn't think. When you're doing, if you're doing anything dynamically, so for example, you're doing, say, the blocks in the whisk, and you have a look at the ways dealing with that, they often find them really, really difficult. Now, there's no input on that because I've done a very quick input on what he's to do. Then he goes to carry out the blocks, and you will really, really see a lot of these at the elaboration stage cognitive dysfunctions in a test like that. You know, it's really annoying when they come to the blocks they've done not too badly up to now, and then they're completely and utterly unable to do that subtest. Then you can see displaying at the elaboration stage here. I'm sorry to put that on you on a Wednesday morning. You're not long back from Easter. You see the complexity you do, don't you, of all of that? Astonishing. Right. Well, in that case, it is 10:30. That's good enough timing. I'll stop recording now. So there's the cognitive map is linked to those cognitive functions, obviously. Okay. And what it does is it gives you these 7 parameters and within what are described in this cognitive map, which describe the whole experience of the learning lesson or whatever. And you can, as it says here, it can locate specific problem areas for the learner. But these are the main areas that cognitively you would find within a learning situation. So if you turn to page 6 of your notes, and we got the cognitive map here. We looked at that. Okay. So the elements of Feuerstein's cognitive map. Now on pages 6 and 7, you've got a description of these 7 parameters, these 7 elements, the university of content, and it goes down that left way anti-clockwise, the university of content, the modality of the language, the complexity, level of abstraction, level of efficiency, cognitive operations, and phase of cognitive functions. Now, I think that because you'll probably only do this once, certainly with me anyway, I think it's worth taking a look at all 7 of these to get an overview of the whole thing, what he means by the cognitive map. And on page 6, we can stop sharing there. I haven't put the rest of it up. It says an important way to conceptualize the relationship between the characteristics of a task and its performance by the subject is the cognitive map. So this is sort of giving an overview of what the subject or the task, let's say, might require or does contain, or the features of it, and then how the learner might respond to that lesson. The conceptual map is not a map, of course, in the topographical sense, but a tool by which to locate specific problem areas and to produce changes in corresponding dimensions. The cognitive map describes the mental act in terms of the 7 parameters that permit us to analyze and interpret a subject's performance. So it's a nice sort of joined up thing in that it's about the task and it's about the way the learner responds to it. So the 7 parameters. Now, the way I think we'll do this for a bit of peace and quiet and to give you a chance to think is the universe of content. And I think that's an easy enough one. How about we read at that paragraph at the top of page 7? So let's take an area of study then and look at the universe of content. So what subjects would anybody have a suggestion for an area of curriculum study that might suit our purpose for an example here?
Well, the one that occurred to me, I mean, when I read that, I was kind of thinking cultural capital and Vygotsky and those kind of ideas. But
Yeah.
the one that kind of occurs in terms of subject areas, I know it's the one you often use as well, Kate, but literature and English and reading. And if you have a home that you grow up in that has all those things, you're able to shortcut very quickly into material. While if you don't, that's going to be very challenging.
Absolutely, yeah. So I always use English, but I was thinking of one thing I did a wee bit with IE Kids was the solar system in science. Okay, so the area of content was the solar system, and my concern with it was that I wasn't too sure what their understanding of the solar system was. So it was actually the content was quite unfamiliar to the subject. You know, when I said the solar systems, even in secondary, there was a vagueness. Oh, it's something to do with the sky, isn't it? They're again unable to sort of verbalize what the solar system is. And then, you know, that sort of exercise you can do. I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but I did with them, which is we said to them, I want you to draw a picture of the Earth with the sun and the moon in the picture. You ever try that one?
No.
So draw a picture of the system, where the Earth lies within the solar system. So draw a picture of the Earth with the sun and the moon in the picture. And interestingly, with that particular content, then you'll see what their understanding actually is. So you'll get it ranging from kids who do draw the Earth as a proper size in comparison to the moon and the sun, and also where it lies and so forth in the solar system. And you'll get others who draw you a great big green ball, and then a great big yellow ball with a smiley face and a banana. That's their description of the Earth. Now, and then I go back on that and I say, now, hold on a second. I mean, not just like that, but what does it really look like? What is it really like? And those who draw the banana really don't have no ability to go beyond that. And this is where their experiential culture and educational background would come in on that one, in that all they can think of with the moon is stories they had in their childhood in picture books, where the moon was a big yellow banana, or the sun was a big smiley face. And definitely the Earth was the biggest planet in the solar system, which of course it obviously isn't. And so so the content may be unfamiliar and thus may require such an intensive investment that is no longer useful for providing information about the cognitive functions and operations it involves, the real target of the assessment. So that was so not really that obvious. They should have known what the solar, they should have known, they should have some idea of where it lay. But to my mind, all those cognitive functions at the input and certainly when I asked them to draw it then at the elaboration, were simply not operating, to actually be able to represent and visualize what that actually looks like when you put it onto a one-dimensional piece of paper. Okay, so manipulation of the content will become a source of insight for change. So when you see, if they're able to sort of I would say that exercise would be like an assessment, wouldn't it? You say, well, you draw a picture and what would it look like? And then you get an idea of what they think it looks like. And I think that's the very, very good exercise to have at the input stage when you're trying to introduce something on the content, maybe, or you're figuring out this content is completely new to them. So then I'm still at the input stage in content. I'm going to have to go back to that and explain what the solar system is, show them pictures of what it actually looks like, and so on, and even have models around or whatever to show the relationship between the planets and the stars and the moon and the sun and everything like that. Do you see? So the content is easy enough to understand. It's what the thing actually is about. And they're your older ones, secondary kid, primary, and well, secondary certainly will have absolutely no experience whatsoever of certain new things, or this very vague, completely unadulterated and sort of unhashed understanding of what the topic is and what the subject is. Does that make sense? Okay. That would be interesting for you to do that, because there was another difference I saw in that exercise. In one group of kids, they were practically all girls. I think there were 1 or 2 boys. And in the other, they were all boys. Okay, on that draw of the earth. And the all boys ones were secondary boys who were in the lowest attaining group in the secondary. They were in the lowest year 8 class. The girls were older, they were about 14, and they were in girls' grammar schools in Uri. Which of those groups drew the banana?
I mean, you would logically think the boys, but I'm guessing the way you put the question.
I was amazed. The girls drew the bananas. I mean, I went around them and I said, you know, is that what it really looks like? Really looks like? Well, 14 girls' grammar schools. And I think it's both the bad way in which girls are taught these things is no excuse. But you see, the boys, I still have some of their drawings. It was astonishing. They were much more sort of could see it a wee bit more. Not all of the boys, but a lot of them. And they were the ones I felt really did have a good chance with IE to sort of pick up on that. Okay, anyway, on that one. Now let's do the rest of them fairly quickly. Read the modality of language. So this is easy enough to understand too. Now, does not make sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we have to consider your modality, the way you're putting the thing across, and it has to be, you should with weaker learners make it as multisensory as you can so that it's in different kinds of modalities to help them. All right, the phase of the mental act is the third one. This is where we're going to. Now, I imagine that's easy enough to understand. The isolation of the phase, what does that mean?
Suppose figuring out what goes into
The input.
the input and then when that becomes elaboration and then output.
So just doing the teaching at the input is, you know, isolating it. You can look at that and work out with the responses that you're getting and some of the trial and error things they try to do for you, whether they have got it at that point or not, and whether to let them go then and do something on their own. There needs to be more, probably for weaker learners, more isolating of the phases. So you spend more time at the input. Do teachers spend more time at the input? It is not their fault that they don't. And they don't, because they reckon they've too much to do. To go on the go. But if your child is weaker, then you need to, so this is the 3 phases of the mental act. I think I get it more clearly when I call it the mental act. So the whole mental act, the 3 phases is the mental act. Going right through it.
But you know the way with input, like you were saying, they don't have enough time or whatever. Is input not like the most important, because you nearly can't go on to elaboration or output unless
Yeah, well, it is the most important. You're totally right, Kelsey. I mean, once I think people think it's an old-fashioned idea. I will tell them what the learning intentions are. I will tell them what the rules are. I will tell them what's involved here. And then they go on and do something, right? And it's that whole idea of if you're clever enough, you'll be able to do it with that minimum amount of input. Okay. And if you can't do it, well, then you're not clever. That's a very old-fashioned way of looking at that. So the more mediating teacher would say, let me spend a wee bit more time at the input. So for example, something difficult that they're going to read for comprehension. And it's a new book and it's quite a hard book. At the input level, you will be doing that quite long-winded introduction to the book. So I'll do title, author, illustrator, blurb, and then link the text to the child's self. About the book that makes it interesting, and then engage in looking at the first part of the book, let's say the difficult vocabulary you're going to encounter in this book. All of that would be put down in front of the learners at the input stage phase before they'd read a single word. Now, that's not even going to take that long. But if I ask myself the question, why would I do that? It's to ensure they will have a better chance of understanding the thing.
Yeah, and then like your elaboration stage may not take as long, or your output stage may not take as long.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, well, obviously it's different now. We have a classroom of however many, and
yeah,
Mary's not getting it, but John is, or I understand that, but yeah.
I'm giving them a chance at the beginning with the input by doing as much as I can. A lot of the old-fashioned way of looking at it would be, look, I'm going to read this. They will figure out what the words mean as we read on. They will figure out the context and the background and so on and so on and so forth, and the meaning of this book as we read on. But not necessarily so.
Yeah.
In the old days, if you're introduced to Dickens, and they said, "Oh, you're watching that Great Expectations thing." That's all.
No, it's supposed to be good though, or well, different, put it that way.
I can't stand the way what they've done to Dickens. But anyway, reading the start into that, my goodness, if somebody didn't explain a lot to me in that, I'm along there. I don't have context, I don't have vocabulary, I don't have, genre of text, I don't have a lot of things. So that input, you're totally right, Kelsey, I think is the most important part. Is a mental act. Okay, the cognitive operations required by the mental act. Now, what is the other word for these? Mental operations. These are the mental operations, okay? The act, but according to the rules or operate by which information is organized, transformed, manipulated, understood, and acted upon. All of the things that your cognitive functions would have enabled you to do if they're working will now be called upon if you have to do analogical thinking or logical thinking or transitive thinking, comparisons and all that stuff that's within the mental operation. The one I always go for is inferential thinking, because that is, the mental operation of inferential thinking is, I can't, another thing with that is, I can't make that child do it if he really doesn't have the cognitive functions to do it. So if I'm looking at inference and he has to infer from the suggestions made to him, if he can't do it, I can certainly tell him and show him what the inferences meant and what they were. But will he be able to do that the next time he comes to something filled with inference? So, for example, in autism, I would say inferential thinking is not one of the greatest mental operations that an autistic child has. because he goes into a situation and most people going into it would immediately infer what I'm supposed to do here. So there's a young man I know who's fairly severely special needs, learning difficulties, and autistic. Take him anywhere, and he is taken lots of places. He immediately doesn't know what way he's supposed to perform in there. So his sister takes him to the mass, she'll take him out to the pub, she'll take him to parties and things, and he more or less responds the same way in any of those situations. He cannot infer that there's a different way of operating there. So I can't make him either. I can more or less contain him in the situation in which he is and, you know, enable him to sort of calm down or do whatever. But really, it's not something, it's not a mental operation he is actually, I think, capable of. Do you agree with that? So I think mental operations are things where you are either capable of doing them or not. And the easiest one to give an example of that is prediction. So a child of 5 is very, very bad. You know, you read the story up to there and you say, what's going to happen now? The child immediately doesn't understand what that means. I'm supposed to use the evidence I've got up to now in order to predict what I think will happen next. Now, will she learn how to predict? Yes. As she gets older and has more experience of doing this, she will. But in some situations, I think some of the mental operations are simply not possible. You'd be very interested in transitive relations. It's one of the level 3 instruments, and it's quite difficult. That kind of mental operation of, you know, making comparisons and excluding and coming to logical and critical thinking sort of solutions. It's a very difficult instrument. The cognitive operations, mental operations. And then number 5, level of complexity. So that's easy enough, isn't it? Each task is different. Some are harder, some are easier. As you see that with the instruments, they start off easy and they move into hard. And level of abstraction is easy enough to understand too. Okay. So for demonstrations, a lot of the tasks require that abstract thinking. I have the cartoon, I have the drawing, but basically, what is the meaning of that beyond this drawing, this cartoon that I have? They're more abstract than, well, analytic perception can be abstract at times too, but it often is from the, it's more concrete in that I can see the shapes I'm supposed to be looking out for and so on. So anything that's more abstract is more challenging. And the last one, the level of efficiency. Do you get that last sentence then? This parameter is not to be confined with the question of the subject's capacity, although in conventional psychometric procedures, there is very frequently confusion between the two. The difference between efficiency and capacity. So what would you see as the difference there?
Capacity, whether you can do it. Efficiency, how efficiently you can do it, you know, in what speed, how much effort does it take?
That is right. So psychometric assessments deal with capacity because we don't enable them to do anything. We just say, here it is, that's what you have to do it. Okay. Whereas if you do it dynamically, you get a better idea of his capacity because we're enabling better efficiency. I should write that down. That sounds makes sense to me. Okay. All right. See the difference. So if I give him a psychometric test, even the Ravens, and he goes to do it and he doesn't do it right, I might say, well, he's not capable of making those visual transfers and that connection in the Ravens matrices. But if I spend a wee bit more time explaining to him what's involved in doing them, then he can become, that can improve his efficiency and hence his capacity, his ability to do it. Okay, it will affect your final IQ score, but it will give you an idea of the potential to be more efficient. Okay, now, page 8. Now, I didn't put this up on the PowerPoint, but maybe I should have done. You've got the 7 parameters are there. And I did this sort of myself, so the boxes are fitting in as best I could make them fit in. Content, modality, operation, complexity, abstraction, so forth, all around their efficiency and the phases. Just give a quick scan to that because we've already read the paragraphs above. So have a look at these. It's all summated then on that little circle.
So complexity, is that like, you know, say in maths, the way you might get like a maths problem and there could be 4 parts within that problem?
Yeah.
So that would fall under that, okay.
Yeah, and so in one of them you only got one thing to do. In another
Yeah.
one, there were several aspects.
Parts.
that you needed to
Okay.
do. Yeah. Complexity. So the whole of the mental act is there. One question I want to ask you, what does dependent on crystallization of the mental act mean under efficiency? Degree of efficiency required, for example, rapidity, precision of performance, dependent on crystallization of the mental act and practice through familiarity. So what does that dependent on crystallization of the mental act mean?
Maybe it means to what point this act is automated. It became automatic for this person.
Yeah, absolutely. That is that they have got a firm grasp of exactly what it is they have to do. Isn't that right? It's crystallized. Something that's crystallized becomes hardened, doesn't it? Okay. I sometimes think, again, a lot of the language can block us, but it's not that hard to go down into it. Okay. So there are 2 things that are relevant here. One is that I can certainly get an overview of the learner's performance in all those 7 parameters. But as a teacher, I can also be aware of them when I am designing a lesson. Now, I do think we do that, certainly, and they probably wouldn't have time for it. But if you've got special needs and you've got learning difficulties, then you need to be, and I think to some extent you already do it very quickly. How difficult is that? What's the modality I'll be using? What is the content? You know, they're in sort of highfalutin language there, but they're fairly common things that we do. The level of abstraction and complexity and the degree of efficiency required are often not thought of. Okay, and then as for the input, elaboration and output, I'll be looking at, you know, I need to really see what I would be looking for at each of those when I'm doing something with them. Now, just to see if we can exemplify that, analytic perception. If you just get your instrument out and look at Unit 2, pages 5. And then that will take us neatly into. So if you look at pages 2 to 5, Unit 2, so we've done already, you would have done unit 1, which would be the first page on the cover page. That's okay. And have a wee quick scoot through those few pages. You have the model on the left-hand side, and all you have to do is find it. Same in number 3, only they're colored this time. And become more complex as well. Page 4. Same thing, identifying the shapes within the big shape, and this becomes even more complex as you go to that one. Page 4. And then page 5. The same thing as page 4, but this time more difficult because you've got to correct the errors. So that unit is requiring you to see, analyze something and see an item within the big picture. But as you can see, and the bridging from this would be very provoking. You have to think, where will I bridge to from this? It becomes ever more complex because by page 5, you're presented with the same thing and you have a lot of visual transfer to do, a lot of internalization to look and see, and you need precision and accuracy, and you need a plan, and a cunning one as well. You need a cunning plan in order to work out how I'm going to identify the frames within the design. After you find them, see their number correctly, cross out those numbers which are incorrectly printed on the sections within the design. Now, I can tell you that absolutely takes forever. It's very challenging, but it's also intrinsically motivating. That is, the task in itself is doable. You think, oh, I can do that. It's doable. Doesn't at first glance look what it really is. And you go at it and you become more insistent on getting it. Those that give up are the kids who block, of course, and who just, I can't do that, immediately have a blocking. All right. And that's a very interesting page for that. Now, I've got it on the cognitive map on page 9. So content, complex figures divided in a number of parts, yes. Figural with verbal instructions. So all the instructions are explicit. Now the mental operations, and this is interesting for it. Articulation, discrimination, differentiation, representation, and hypothetical thinking. Do you think those are relevant there? Discrimination and differentiation to me seem similar words. What do you think the difference is between those two? Articulation is easy enough, isn't it? Discrimination and differentiation, and then representation. I have to sort of see it in my mind in order to identify it, to analyze, and hypothetical if-then type thinking. So discriminate and differentiate, what's the difference between those two? They're very similar, aren't they? So you discriminate by dismissing some, and you differentiate by looking at the differences between them.
Sorry, Kate, I missed where this is in. Is it in the notes or in the book?
It's in the notes here on page.
In the book.
You have it in the notes.
Yeah. Okay.
Page 8, you've got the overall summary map, and page 9, you've got this example of unit 2.
Okay, my pages don't go as yours, so I'm just a little confused.
Page 8 that we have it on.
All right then, okay. So complexity is low for the early pages of unit 2, moderate pages 4 to 5 because of number parts and non-familiarity. That's what makes those last 2 pages they are more difficult. Page 5 is even more difficult than page 4. Okay, so the level of complexity, and I think you'll find that with all of the units within the instruments, that it moves from lower to moderate difficulty. Low abstraction. Why would you think that those pages 2 to 5, have low abstraction.
Because they're giving us the shapes to work with. We don't have to imagine anything.
That is correct. That's totally right. They're just concrete shapes. It's all concrete. I have to do visual transfer and do my dismissing and my differentiating and seeing comparisons and so forth. Analyzing is what you're really doing. It's a big analytical perception, analysis involved, but it's not, there's no abstraction in it. And then for efficiency, page 2 high, page 3 and 4 moderately low, and page 5 moderate. Efficiency required in order to do it. So they reckon that page 2 high efficiency. What does that mean?
Because it's like, is it because it's page 2, it's towards the start of it, so it's going to be slightly easier?
Yes.
So it'll be not
yeah.
quicker to do, but easier for them to do than say what page.
That's right. I will expect greater efficiency too than on pages 4 and 5. And then just read the input, elaboration, and output there. Just on those pages 2 to 5. So there's a fair bit of high level cognitive functioning involved in that unit, in those units. Now you see at this stage, having done that very quick look at the cognitive functions and dysfunctions and the cognitive map, you really need to go to bed and have a rest and think about it. But we can't do that. They do require a little bit of thinking again and reading over things and so on till you feel you have crystallized your understanding of them. Okay, but do you know what the most important question is? Is it worth doing that? Will this be of any value to me in my delivery of instrumental enrichment? Because thankfully, it's all linked back to, you say, what'll I do then? I'll do some instrumental enrichment. You know, it addresses all of this. So that's an easy way out. But is it of any value to you to have looked at the cognitive functions and the cognitive map? What do you think?
Well, it provides us with things to look out for when doing dynamic assessments.
Yes.
It provides us with the structure and the framework for the dynamic assessments and for identification of strengths and weaknesses. And we can tailor our way of delivery based on that. That's
it. That is it. That's really it. It's sort of having a better grasp yourself of what you're asking of kids.
Mm-hmm.
Where they might find a difficulty with that, you're just being more reflective on that. Where they might find a difficulty with that, how I can mediate to help. And then looking at their actual performance then in the light of all of that. What, you know, where are they going? There was one wee fella, I had, Simon, and I never did quite locate exactly where the cognitive dysfunctions were. Throughout all of the work I did with them, with IE, there were 14 of them in the group. And Simon just sort of, and Peter as well, really flummoxed me. It was at all 3 phases, things were difficult for those 2 boys. Interestingly, in the same class, other boys didn't have the same dysfunctions at all. They were able to respond better at the input, and then their output was also a lot better. But these 2 lads always needed help. They just simply couldn't really get it. And there were definitely mental operations they were not capable of doing, I thought, in the end of it all. Which is an awful hard thing to have to say. But however, it helped them and they worked out all right. They have developed into very good young men now. So I don't know if it helped or not, but it didn't do them any harm anyway, is all I could say. It's understanding why we need to know all that and then what usefulness there will be in it. Okay. Anybody, I don't want to now we're going to go straight into analytic perception. So any thoughts on any of that before we do that? Time check now is 20 to 12. We'll take this on into the afternoon anyway, that's not a problem. Any thoughts?
Well, just it certainly helps around thinking now from the outset about mediation. Like, what is it that we need to try to get them to be able to do, you know, from the very beginning of that instrument.
Definitely.
So that's helpful.
Mediation is the thing. And I want to be able to mediate, what would you say, profitably, you know, efficiently, mediating for something I know will be necessary for them, they will need to have. You know, that I think that those sorts of wee dodgy learners do learn well together. And that really helps. They sort of nearly mediate each other, you know, and it's the best way for them to do things. Will we plow on then and have a wee look at analytic perception? And it starts on page 18, or no, 10 in my thing. Maybe it's 9 in your book. And up there, we've got the logo for analytic perception. And just on page 10, here are some of the notes I gave your seminar group when we looked at analytic perception and an example of a philosophy for children lesson. Summary what analytic perception is. We look at that wee bit first of all. I'll come back to the objectives and so on. But the instrument focuses on the skill of breaking the whole into its parts and putting the parts together to make a whole. So analytic thinking and synthetical thinking are mental operations. And this instrument works very, very well on all of that. What are analysis and synthesis, and why are they important? Just have a read at those 2 paragraphs there. Now, you see that thing there about overgeneralized perception, and you don't see the parts for the, you know, for the whole. Confusing there and there. Those homonyms, those words that sound the same but are spelled differently, you can do them to the cows come home. But there are lots of children who don't have the analytical perception needed to say, oh, that's that one and that's the other one. Now, they'll go straight into secondary right through, and they'll still muddle up those homonyms because they sound the same and they haven't analyzed the differences between them and when they're used and what their functionality is. So what they haven't been properly taught is a generalized experience of how to analyze anything. So when you're doing this instrument, you have to be constantly bridging into, we're analyzing something. Why are we doing that? You see the example there of analyzing the sentence so that we see the nouns and the verbs. Okay? And there might be other things. You can get lots of other examples. I always go for the English one, identifying the nouns and the verbs. And a lot of teachers will say, what is the point of that? They know, I tell them what noun is, tell them what a verb is, but let's get on with it. Well, in my view, it is very, very important that they know those for 2 reasons. One, because in doing it, I am helping them to analyze. And in the old days, it used to be called parsing a sentence, you know, so you work out what each word's function was in the sentence. And so it was good for the understanding of the language. And secondly, it was good for enabling them to do better analysis. That process of that mental operation of analytical thinking was being done then. So give me an example away from curriculum altogether of where you need to be analytical in your thinking. Where would you need to be analytical in your thinking?
Would it be like, I don't know, say when you get paid,
Yeah,
when you say, okay, so I have to pay this bill, this bill, this bill, and I want to buy this pair of runners that fits the amount, but I'm not going to have enough when I break it all down to buy those runners.
that's definitely analytical thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think there are some people who really haven't been taught how to do that? Haven't got that mental operation of analyzing the whole situation into its parts?
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
There must be, when people do exactly what you've said and yet buy the runners anyway. You know, and so and don't even realize they have done that and don't think, oh, why have I no money now? It's funny, I've no money left in the bank. How did that happen? Your finance definitely require analytical thinking. I was even thinking of the affective too, the emotional. So for example, if there's a disruption in the house or an argument or something in the house and everybody goes going ballistic and there's a, you know, a flare up, that can happen in every household. Does analytical thinking help in any way with that one? You know, the emotional end.
I would say, yeah, like, because you'd have to analyze that, okay, well, this argument is going to affect everyone in the house, not just the 2 or 3 people that's arguing. It's going to affect everyone.
Yeah. And you can even analyze beyond that too, can't you, Kelsey? You can say, why did that happen? Who started that? I know we do say that question, who started that? That's a good analytical thinker. Who was the first one said that? What happened there? What happened then? What happened then? Your analytical thinking in an affective situation can help you to come to some conclusion as to perhaps how to resolve it. You know, there's so many examples of how to actually do that. So it's all linked to that sort of behavior of reducing your impulsive responding to everything. Stop. Consider, analyze what has happened, analyze what is before you, and see exactly how we reach this conclusion. When do we synthesize? Well, I think, well, I was going to say the ladies, but the gentlemen as well will understand this one of putting all your bits of clothes on the bed and trying to decide which of them will I wear with what. And you're going, oh, and you put one of them on and you put the other one on, you go, no, not that. Now, I have to say, you can be, I'm sure, clear about that. I don't spend a lot of time doing that kind of thing, but I can actually do it in a representational way. I can think, well, more than what'll I put on that one and then that, oh, I know what I'm going to put on then. I can see it in advance of myself, can't I, what I'm going to wear. And what I'm doing is I'm synthesizing the bits of clothing in order to make the representation of myself that I want to make. Is that not what it's like? Do you see people who are not good at that? Yeah. Although that's a subjective view, but I mean, you do. But that's an example, all right. Putting together a dinner. Is
I was thinking that example and how some people are way better at working without instruction and they can just tell what a natural kind of synthesis is of ingredients and it'll taste good. And others absolutely just struggle with that.
Yeah, although a lot of people can do that synthesis thing for cookery because of experience. But then a lot of other people are so good at it, they think, today I'm going to put this in. I know what that will create. So making the meal, the whole meal, planning it and all the rest of it, and then making it, planning it and making it, requires analytical and definitely synthetical thinking. I think it's one of the most common that we have is analyzing and synthesizing. So any other examples that come to mind?
Well, just example from my work is doing a psychological report. You have to analyze all the data that you've gathered, and then you have to synthesize it in such a way that it makes sense.
It's exactly what you're doing. And you see, a lot of us as grown-ups and experienced people, we can do that. We know to do it. We do it instinctively. But we're talking about children who aren't explicitly aware of analyzing and synthesizing, and when they do it and why they do it, and why it would be useful to be more aware of it. You know, because it is one of the most important things that you actually do, analyze and synthesize.
Do you think they come a little bit easier to you, both of them, with experience? Like, so you'll find like teenagers, adults will be better at this than children due to experience?
A lot will, a lot won't.
Okay.
It does depend on their mental operations and whether you're capable of them. Or thinking capability is one thing, but that efficiency is another. Did anybody ever talk to me about it before? That's why thinking and cognitive curriculum needs to be taught as a separate, if you like, outfit, rather than infused all the time into the curriculum, you know. So I think you need to be made aware and taught these things. You know, finding your way. I don't know. Do you watch that thing, Race Across the World? I think that's what it's called. It's these pairs, and they are given a challenge to get from one place to another. The one we were watching was in Canada. And it was astonishing to watch the different pairs. And the one who got to the, you know, Banff or whatever it was first was the, you know, was winner. You got a point for it. And the last was put out. If you got there last, you were put out. It was amazing to watch the way everybody planned. The pairs planned separately. And the way they analyzed carefully the route they might take and the alternative route they might take, and the cost of it all, and would they have enough money left because they had a limited budget, you know, all that kind of thing. And one pair was a father and daughter, and the daughter was definitely had emotional problems. Every time there was a hitch in the road, she cried. Not that that helped at all, it didn't really help, but she cried anyway. And she often found it very, very difficult to sort of discuss it with her father, what they were going to do. He did his best, you know, but she'd be a girl in her late teens, I would have thought, maybe even early 20s. But there were other examples as well. That's a perfect example of the ability to analyze and then synthesize. Well, certainly to analyze when you're doing your planning like that. All these things, I know you're going to say they come naturally to some people and they just do it. But it's great to be explicit and to verbalize these things so that we're more aware of them then and use them more efficiently. Right, let's go on then and do our, there is our analytic perception. And that is the cover page. We'll come back to that in a minute or two, where we look at the meaning of that logo for the instrument. But here are the goals. The general goals are uses perceptual processes to develop a variety of cognitive strategies that lead to attitudinal and motivational changes in a person's approach to reality. Now, again, it's all very well saying these things, but what does that mean? Attitudinal. So if I am more analytical, does it change my attitude? Do I sort of become more confident, linked to motivational, and then I will do it? I have analyzed, therefore I know what's happened here. I know what needs to be done. And I then am more able to go ahead and do them. Is that what that overall goal means? An awful lot of bridging is required in this instrument because they'll do all these pages like the dots. and they'll find all the shapes. And really, if you don't bridge to these important reasons for doing it, then it all goes by the by, you know. So the objective to teach strategy will enable you to divide the whole into its parts for specific reasons. To teach strategies which enable learners to synthesize parts into a whole, to provide practice in restructuring, putting the thing back together again, and to encourage changes in attitude and motivation in an individual's approach to reality by using perceptual processes to develop various cognitive strategies. Now, your approach to reality absolutely does mean that sort of crystallizing, that sort of explicit verbalizing, if you like, of what it is I'm being asked to do, or where I am, or what needs to happen here. So you sort of have that. Now, the way I'm going to do it, time check 5 to 12. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take the units. And has anybody taught this yet?
I think I did one page in it last summer, filling in for Shay. I think I did. So, yeah, I think I'm thinking of bridging things I was using for it.
Aye, what we're doing, yeah. They do give you lots of examples in the manual, but you can always think of more yourself as well. Let's look at the different units and what their intentions are. So the cover page and page 1. So just 2 pages for this unit. To learn that a whole may be divided into its component parts, to view each component as a whole in itself, to label each part and sum up the parts that compose the whole. Sum up the parts that compose the whole. To understand that the number of parts into which a whole can be divided may be arbitrary and a function of need. So the whole will be divided into the parts depending on your reason for dividing it. Okay. Now let's look at the cover, but we'll not spend too much time on it. But the cover page logo is fairly clever in that the logo has this, what would you call that sort of shape? What would you call that shape that's there in the middle of the logo?
An oval?
Yeah, it's just sort of like a narrow oval shape. And it's the whole. And then we've got these other shapes that are analyzed into that compose the whole. And then we would look at how we might describe those different shapes and so on. And what will that look like when I bring it all back together again? Interestingly, you know, some children don't find it that easy to imagine what that'll look like if I move all those parts. If I move all the parts, how will I change the oval, original shape? But if you go on to page 1, color each section a different color. Here's a number in each section. There are 2 factors to be dealt with here, the color and the number. What are the colors that we've been given? And interestingly here, we've been given colors which are actually in the form of vertical and horizontal lines, diagonal lines. So we've got a red and a gray sort of color, and we've got diagonal, vertical lines and diagonal lines. How many sections has the whole been divided? The answer there is quite simple because it's 4. Okay. Now look down the whole page and see. In advance of doing any lessons, you make sure you've done the exercises yourself. Into how many sections has the whole been divided?
For 2, is it?
Yeah, 10. Is it 10?
Was it 9?
9. And with that one, you know the way with dots and all the instruments, you discuss strategy. So what's the best strategy, the most efficient strategy for doing that one?
Maybe number them.
You could number them, yeah. That's the most efficient. But suppose you decide not to number them,
Color them.
you color them in, or you could go from the top one and count clockwise right around and then go in the middle, or you could count all the triangles and then all the rectangles and then the square. Of which of those is the most efficient?
Numbering.
Numbering them, definitely. Because you're doing it now. You'll bridge from that into, you see this first unit, pages 1 and 2. I would do these together with them, so that they get a flavor of that input stage for the whole instrument, so that they get a flavor of what's going to be involved here and the strategies you might use in order to do any of these, and then what we're doing that for, what the bridging is for. That one there reminds me of somebody I knew used to love to take everything apart, and take it apart just to see what they all look like, and then put them all back together again. And inevitably, there would be a bit left out that didn't go back in. Now, it's a very simple bridging to that example there, but you think, why did he do that? Why did he make that mistake? Does that happen? Have you ever done that? Like, for example, with Lego, you often have parts left over, but then that's because they give you extra bits. But with Lego, you're analyzing and synthesizing a great deal. What about number 3? Into how many sections has the whole been divided?
5.
Yeah,
Mhm.
how many?
5.
5. I think it's 5. 1, 2, 3, the big ones, and then 4, 5, the 2 small ones. It's 5. Same type of effects. And into how many sections has the whole been divided in the bottom one?
Same again. 5.
That last one.
Yeah, 5 again.
5 again. Yeah. I'm just gonna look and see if I got my. Yeah. So what's the point of the first 2 pages then?
I suppose being able to like analyze it, to count the different shapes and be able to, I suppose, see that within one shape there may be another shape that's going to be 1, 2, 3.
That's right. Yeah, they've been divided in that one-dimensional way that you have there. And so I think that one of the most important points you'll make here is, you know what, when we're doing this instrument, we are really going to have to be clear before we start what our strategy will be. And examples of what strategies might be could be discussed at this point. And then bridging from that to where do people do this kind of thing? When would you take something and break it down? For what reason? So again, you know, you maybe go to any curriculum area. Science is a great one because there's so much there in science that you really need to break it down into its parts in order to get a better understanding of the whole concept, of the whole idea. Okay, that's unit 1. Now, unit 2 is the one we looked at, pages 2 to 5. So just do that again. We'll read to find and delineate simple and complex figures identical to given standards when they are embedded in a complex whole. To be flexible in changing strategies to fit the changing demands of the task. So yes, strategy is very important. So we'll do a quick scoot over the pages, page 2. In the far left frame of each row, so the instructions are explicit here, is a part that is hidden in each of the complete designs in that row. Misspelling there. Locate the part in each design and color it. In the design, the part may appear in an orientation different from that of the model. So a lot of explanation needed at the input. All that language, maybe do understand it now, having done a little bit more of IE. But what does that mean? You'll say to them that that's going to happen in the tasks that you have to do. Okay, so what will you have to do in order to do this correctly? So you take your time at the input in order to get them to understand this. The other thing that happens is that the size would seem to change. Or in fact, does it change? So I've got a size out there, and then I look across and I see, by the third one across, they're now confusing me because I've got 2 squares. And they're trying to do the same with frame 4 to some extent as well. So frames 3 and 4 are a bit confusing because I've now got 2 squares. So withdraw your impulsivity and try to work out what the right one should be. So it has to be the right size. I don't know if you get them in dots where they try to take rulers in order to work out what the size of the shapes might be in the dots. And you have to really say, no, you're not allowed to do that. It's sort of like your visual transfer. But you see how that's going to happen in all of these across. There's going to be confusion. So look at the second row. Now, do you see any confusions that might limit your output there?
When there's more than one triangle within the shape, it's certainly, you have to pause and think and consider.
Yeah. Which one is it going to be? So for example, the first one's easy enough, isn't it? It's that left-hand one. I think that's the only feasible one, the left-hand triangle. What about the second one?
Bottom left, is it?
The bottom left, yeah, because I'll get confused that the top right-hand one is a triangle, but it's so much bigger, isn't it? Then what about the third one?
The top left.
Top left again. And the fourth one?
It's in the middle.
In the middle, popped up on the diagonal line. Now, is that one easy? So we could discuss that. That one might be easier because there's not so much to distract me. And I don't have anything else that confuses me as much, and then as much as some of the other ones. And then the last one,
The left-hand side one again.
yeah,
3 triangles.
yeah. On the last one, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles. Which of the triangles is the one that's in the model?
The first triangle, it's between the.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you explain it? Yeah, the left-hand side kind of one.
It's not that there are 4 triangles, there are 4 shapes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So which shape is the right one? I think it's the second one. You agree? All right.
Yeah.
And then let's just do the last one. And we're not going to have time to do all when we walk our way through a lot of the pages. And the last one, can you see the shape there? Yes, that's easy enough to find. In the second one,
Bottom left.
yeah, bottom left is, and if you look right across that, there's some like a cue that is supposedly helping you. In fact, there are cues in all of them. Yeah, what is the cue that's there helping you to differentiate, to find the shape?
The orange line.
Yeah, there's color. Okay, and just the question about whether I'm going to look out for color in all of them and whether color helps or not, because I could go back over them again and say, is the right one always colored? And the answer to that would be no. The right one isn't always colored. Well, maybe it is. No, it isn't. No. But why do they use the color? That's all I'm going to ask them. Why do you use the color? It helps some of the shapes to stick out, to stand out a bit. Okay. Can you find all of that one in the bottom row then?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's do a walk of page 3, which is just very like page 2, only the shapes are a little bit more complex. On each line, indicate the number of times the section next to it appears in the design. So, number 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4 of those shapes. So we need to verbalize exactly what. So what will I call that wee shape there beside number 4 in the first one? What will I call it? Like a little arrow or something there, isn't it? So there were 4 of those in the shape. In the first one then, what do I have to do?
Count them.
Count them, because they're all the same. They're all little triangles, aren't they? Equilateral triangles, I think they are. And you count them. In the third one,
You number the triangles.
number them. Yeah, it's like a little tower or a little curved shape, isn't it?
Oh,
Now-
sorry, the third one. I thought you meant the second one.
Yeah. Are you over in the third one?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the second one, but I see what you mean for the third one. Yeah.
Well, on that one, how many of those shapes are there in the model?
For which one now?
For number 2. The
Oh,
second,
I have 8.
we're looking at the wrong one, I think. You're looking at the triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are 8 of the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 of the triangles. Look at the second one then, the little tower shape, little curvy top. How many of those are there in it?
2?
There are just 2. And again, that's a bit puzzling because it looks like there's 3. There are 3, but there aren't. There's only 2. And then the last one. There are 3. Aren't there? 1, 2. No, sorry, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, a lot of bridging. Where does this happen? We can't see the wood for the trees, sort of thing. And then the same exact thing for the last 2 lines there, the last 2 rows. What's your preference? Would you prefer to do them together, or let's sort of just do a taster for each page and move on? What would your preference be?
I'm okay with doing a taste because I kind of like doing them myself. So
Exactly, I know. You think I can do them, I'll do them on my own. But always be sure you have them all completed before you meet the children. And you're given the colour there as an additional aid, if you like, at the task. When do things come along like that? And then you've got pages 4 and 5, which is fascinating, I think, pages, where the numbered sections are hidden in the design, which appears within the frame. Find each section, number it appropriately, and darken its outline. And so what it said earlier about changing your strategy now in order to do this one, and because I have to do a whole global overview of the big picture, and then I have to try to find the shapes and what's going to be challenging here. And immediately some of them can see that, well, some of these shapes look alike, and there are other shapes in it that look like. So what will my strategy be? How will I do it? Will I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Or will I see what I can see and then number them as I go? Which strategy will you use and which will be more efficient? Okay, and just to move on quickly, page 5 then. This is a page where really it wouldn't do any harm to actually do it. Mind you, time check. Yeah, but the numbered parts which appear outside of the frame are hidden within the design. After you find them, see that they are numbered correctly. Cross out those numbers which are incorrectly printed on the sections within the design. So what's going to be the problem here? The problem is going to be that some of the numbers inside the big frame are wrong. Okay. Now, do you want to sort of, maybe you're happy enough to leave yourself to do that at a later stage. By the way, the manual never gives you the right answers for any of these pages.
Yeah.
You know, it would help if they did, but they oblige you to do the pages themselves. And I remember that coming up as a question. And they said that when you've done it, you understand what the challenges are yourself. Okay. So finding the shapes and identifying them and having the strategy. So unit 3. Unit 3 goes from page 6 to page 10. Now we look at what the aims of this are: to analyze the whole by the identification, categorization, and summation of its parts. To combine synthesis with analysis in determining the specific elements that can be integrated into the whole. To teach strategies for the cognition, registration, and inclusion of the relevant components of a whole. So this time it's more the emphasis on the analyzing the whole. So in page 6, in each of the following exercises, you are given a model. Choose the box which contains all the parts that make up that design and write its number in the circle provided. Now, this is a visual transfer. There's a lot of demand here. What's the very first thing you would have to do if you are planning to do this page?
Understand the task.
Sorry?
First of all, we will have to make sure we understand the task.
Oh, absolutely. Totally correct. I will have to understand the task. So what I have to do is I'm looking down the whole page, scan the page. How many models do I have? I have 3. I have 3 models. With each model, I've got 4 possible frames, one of which is the answer. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the shapes in my model to be represented in I've actually now analyzed them, and I have to find them in one of the 4 frames. Okay, so the first thing I'll have to do is I will have to verbalize each model. So what do I have in the first one, the first model? And you count and you describe and you verbalize. So I've got 5 parts. 2 of them are rectangles and 3 of them are squares. So I'm looking for 2 rectangles and 3 squares. Is it frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, or frame 4? And we can see that it is frame 2. And then I would say, why is it not frame 1? Or why is it not frame 4? You know what I mean? So why is it that one and why is it not that one? That's always a very good one to say. So I think the answer to number 1 is, or for the first one, is 2. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So the second one then is verbalized, described. So what have I got in this whole? So you see where I'm taking the whole now and breaking it down into its parts and seeing the parts. But in order to know if the answer's right, I have to put those parts back into the whole again. So in the second problem, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. This time it's not so easy to give a geometric shape to them, but I've got 4 parts, 1 smaller than the other, 1 very big, and 2 that are the same. So which of the frames is it?
Number
4.
Number 4?
Yeah.
I'm looking at 4 now. Yes, number 4. I've got the little one, then I've got the big triangle, and then I've got the 2 shapes with the slanted edge on them. Number 4. And again, the same question. Well, another question I would ask there would be, is that harder than the first one? Is that?
Maybe just shapes are irregular.
Hmm.
Some of the shapes.
It's because it's not so easy to name and label then. So I'm going to make the point then that, well, it's often useful to be able to name and label. My brain then is able to work better and more efficiently. And the last one is quite hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shapes in it. You can't describe them. So they would describe them for me. I've got 2 squares and I've got 1 big triangle and I've got 2 smaller triangles, which are the same size as the big triangle. Okay, so which of these frames would it be?
Number 3.
Number 3, absolutely. The 2 small frames, the 2 small squares, I've got the big triangle and I've got the 2 smaller triangles that will be the same size as the big triangle. And again, just commenting on which.
In terms of the mediation case, I'm guessing we're trying to get them from the start, from the first one, not to just shortcut if they recognize familiar shapes, you know, in terms of like, you could have a kind of a strength in the visual transfer piece, but to actually count up the pieces, how many are there of each type, can we twist them around, you know, that kind of process.
I wouldn't care how much mediation you do on this. You know, it definitely would not be enough on page 6 to just sort of say, and go down very quickly and say, what do you do? You know, what's it say? What do the instructions say? What are you supposed to do? And then let them plow on. This is one where I think, depending how weak the kids are, how much need they have for mediation, I would do each one with them. And they'd verbalize, they wouldn't do anything with their pencils until they had verbalized what they've been told to do, what they think they've been told to do, and have verbalized a strategy. What is your strategy going to be? On page 7, in each of the following, you're given a model, choose the box which contains all the parts that make up that design and write its number in the circle provided. So again, the question, how is this the same or different from the last one? Is this page the same? Or is it different?
I think it requires the same kind of skills, but the complexity goes up.
It's more complex, definitely, but it's the same task. I'm looking for the parts of the whole, but this time the whole is very complicated, and therefore it's going to be much more difficult to identify the parts. You can imagine the kind of bridging that you might do from that one, and where there's, you know, that kind of manual work where you do a lot of that kind of thing. And, you know, mechanics or technology or computer work and all that, as well as handicrafts, even simple things like that, can require. So, for example, in a simple example, a very complex meal. I've never made it before, and it's made up of loads and loads and loads of ingredients. Well, then that's going to be, so I can see the picture of the lovely meal that it's going to be, but it's got all these different parts in it. And that means that, what does that mean then? And so we discuss, well, I suppose you're going to have to be careful, tick off things, have a strategy for knowing you've put everything in that was asked. And in fact, make sure you've got everything you need for it. You know, I haven't got any tarragon, so there'll be no tarragon in it today, type of thing, you know, or whatever. You know, bridging across into that's all very, very good. And now you come to a bit of a change in page 8. In the large frame, you have several models. For each model, choose the box which contains all the parts that make up that design and write its number in the space provided. Now, again, as Irina was saying, you're going to have to do a fair bit of input as to what do we have to do here. Scan the whole page. So usually I would read the instruction at the top first, and then scan the whole page with your eyes, just simply, and then go back to the question at the top. At the input, I would need to do that. So in the large, so where's the large frame? I'm going to have to say, okay, there's the large frame, and these are then smaller frames, aren't they? So we'll have to define that. For each model, oh, what do we mean by each model? How many models are there in the large frame? 6. Choose the box which contains all the parts. So choose the box. Which box are we referring to? There are 6 boxes provided underneath that makes up that design and write its number in the space provided. Is this the same or different from page 7? I've got a hole. So the items on the top, the models at the top are the hole, and the boxes at the bottom have the parts. Is that the same as page 7? Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's the same task really you have to do.
Mm.
For a hole, you have to find the parts. But is it different in any way?
Yeah, you have also to discriminate between the boxes.
Yes. And you have the same number of boxes for all the models. So a strategy that would be good would be make sure you identify each of the boxes you've already identified. So for example, in number 1 model, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. I can describe them. I've got two triangles, yeah. I've got a square or a rectangle skewed, and I've got this other shape that has no name. So I've got 4 parts. Can I find it in the boxes below?
Yeah, it's in number 3.
Number 3. And so was it easy to find that one? If you had to scan, what you have to do, you had to scan. This is the kind of chat you would have with the kids. You have to scan all the boxes. That. You know, you have to do all 6 of them. You can't just say it's number 3 without checking 4, 5, and 6, can you? You know, that kind of question. So you're doing the whole overview of the task. So what made you found number 3? Was that easy to find? And if so, what made it easy to find? You were quite quick on getting it there, Killian. What made you immediately recognize that that was the one?
When you were literally verbalizing how many, you had counted out 4 pieces, and then you were verbalizing the type of each type of shape. So then just once those verbal cues were there, actually, I don't think I even scanned 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
It just almost popped because of the verbal cues, if you know what I mean.
I agree. And I'm going to oblige them not to. No, and they will do that. They'll be very quick kids, and they'll get that one very quickly. But I'd say, did you scan all of them? No, I just knew it was that number 3. Yeah, well, how did you know? Because if you didn't scan the rest, how did you know? So making them do things more systematically with more precision and accuracy is going to be also part of this. One of the things that made that one easy was that on the irregular shape, because in actual fact, it's the only one of the boxes. So it helps here if you use your labels right. This is a big frame and these are the boxes. It's the only one of the boxes that has that irregular shape in it. What is confusing is that all the boxes have 4 shapes in them. So in any case, it could be any one of them. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, a lot of bridging would be required. And even first glance at page 9, read the question. In the large frame, you have several models. For each model, choose the box which contains all the parts that make up that design and write its number in the space provided. Oh, by the way, in the space provided does need, be sure we all know what you're supposed to be doing. Okay. Oh, yeah. And I meant to say that when Killian said number 3 for that one on the previous page, on page 8, then I would tick number 3 or circle it there in the box. I've already chosen that one. So I'm going to assume, I'll infer that it won't be used again. And it won't be. I know it won't be. Why? Why do I know? Because all the models have different shapes. They're not all the same as the first model. That's easy enough to infer. So now, this one, is this the same or different from page 8?
Same, I think.
The same, isn't it?
Mhm.
Same, you have a whole thing and you have to find the parts of that thing, that model. What is it different in any way?
Maybe
Shapes
that.
get complicated.
Huh?
Go
It's
ahead.
more. Yeah, sorry, Irina.
I'm just saying that the shapes get more complicated.
It's much more complicated. And the thing that makes them more complicated is that it is harder to label them. So we can't just say square and circle or triangle or whatever. They're all irregular shapes. So we would use that language with them as well. They're irregular shapes. Will my strategy be the same? So the last time I counted 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 shapes in that first one. 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes in that first one. Okay. I'm counting, so I need to find 4. Oh, now the problem is all the boxes have 4 shapes. So I'm going to have to then work out, and this is much more complicated because of the jagged nature of the pieces. The pieces they're not all regular. And just to very quickly look at page 10, because this brings it to the end of the unit, correct the errors. Do the separate parts in each frame fit together so that they form the complete design? If they do not, correct. Okay. So we'll have to scan that page. How many of these do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them. All right. And how is this different and the same?
It's the same because you still have to use the same strategy, like count them, check the shapes.
Yeah.
Like you can see there's 6 squares, 2 triangles in the box. Okay, what have they given me? They've only given me 1 rectangle.
Yeah. 1 rectangle, whereas really I need 2 rectangles.
Mm.
Okay. So in that first one, I need 2 rectangles. So what'll I do? How will I correct that? It just says if they do not correct. So how will I correct that? So I need 2 rectangles and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. I've got 7 squares and 1 rectangle. So how will I correct that one?
Cross out a square and draw a rectangle.
Yeah, well, or draw another square onto that bottom square there. It doesn't matter how they do it.
Yep.
No, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's already got me 6 squares that are part of it. And then I've got 1, now I need another rectangle. So I'll make it in that bottom one there. Just do the second one, just we see if this is right or not. Well, what do you think?
No,
Is there something wrong with it?
I would say yeah.
What's wrong with it?
So you need 1 big triangle and 2 small ones, but they've given us 2 big triangles and 1 small one.
That's right. So I've got 3 rectangles and I've got 1 big triangle and 2 some similar, the same size triangles. All right. And what they've given me is right enough 3 rectangles. That's correct. And I've got 1 big triangle, 2 big triangles, and 1 small triangle. So how will I correct this one?
Maybe draw a line down the middle of one of the second biggest triangle, keep the left-hand side of it.
Absolutely. And that'll give you a smaller triangle. And can anybody tell me, or how have you discussed the use of color in these? Is color meant to be helpful or is it not? Is it helpful here?
Seems more like a deliberate distraction.
Isn't it? Yeah. The color might make you think that, well, that color must be, definitely out there somewhere. But in actual fact, it's just, can't depend on it. That's all that means. You just can't depend on it. Okay, that's unit. That's the third unit. Okay, now any units are actually in this. I think it's 4, 5 units. 5, 6, 7, 8 units. Yeah, because up to page 25 and there are 8 units. So that's unit 3. Now, after lunch, we're definitely going to have a walk through the rest of them. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Because the illustrations won't take us as long because, well, the illustration could take you 2 days if you wanted to do this with each page of the illustrations. But each page is an absolute little gem all its own. So we'll just have an idea of what the main aim of illustrations is, and that'll sort of do us on that one. It's 25 to, so let's say, could we have a break until about 1:05 then?
Yep.
Then and complete analytic perception on page 11. And if you have any burning questions, do bring them along now after lunch. See you shortly.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Everyone shortly.
And so as we begin now the afternoon session, we have just had a look at the notes where units 1 and 2 have more detail. I've provided more detail on the work and some of the bridging that are examples from those 5 pages. But on page, the summary, the structure of the unit, we've got all of the units up to unit 8 summarized on maybe your page 10, page 11 anyway with me. And what we're going to look now at would be go to page unit 4, page 11. So pages 11 and 12 are unit 4. So let's see what that is supposed to be about. Unit 4. So we'll have a read at this first, and then we'll have a look at the 2 pages. To understand that the synthesis of parts into a given whole is contingent upon a prior analysis of the whole into both its parts and the relationship between the parts. Okay. To identify and describe those parts of a whole that are missing from the given component parts, and to construct the missing parts and integrate them into those that are given so as to replicate the given model. All right. So to the left of each section, there is a design. Finish each of the drawings so that when completed, each is the same as its model design. So this is about synthesis of parts into a given whole. So the given whole is on the left and the parts are on the frames to the right, and you have to create the whole. So you not analyze the whole, first of all, in order to see the relationship between the parts, identify and describe those parts of a whole that are missing from the given component parts, and then construct the missing parts. So if you look at the first model, you have 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 examples of how to create that whole. And what happens as you move across all those smaller frames there? What happens is,
There's lines missing.
yeah, there are lines missing in all of them, but more becomes missing. More is missing the further on you go. So you're given fewer and fewer and fewer pieces of the parts. So if you take that one and see if you can draw the last frame. You've only got 2 vertical lines there. And would you have a strategy for drawing that?
Well, for me, my strategy would be to do the outside first. So draw your square.
Yep.
And then go from there.
Absolutely. And that wouldn't that be a very efficient strategy? So if I've got the big square, now what I didn't do there was to describe the model. So which is not the way you would do it with the kids. So you describe the model. I have a big square, and then that square has been divided into 2 rectangles, and each rectangle has been divided into 2 triangles. So that's what you've got there. Are there any of those particular frames that you think would be harder than others for us to do? Is that last one like the hardest one, or?
Well, the dots one might be just as hard, if not harder. That has no lines on it.
No lines, just dots. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, let's look at the second model. So this time for page 11 in analytic perception, I'll ask one of the students to describe that whole model for me. So what do you actually see there? Your hands off your pencils, as it were, and just make them verbalize that. So somebody describe that model for us. Jordan, you didn't get much chance to talk yet.
So the first one?
The second one.
Oh, the second one. It's a big square.
Yeah.
With a little square inside it and
Yeah.
a line going diagonal.
Absolutely. And I write a diagonal line going right through both squares. Okay. All right. Now I would work my way across those one at a time. So in number 1, the first one, and another helpful strategy in order to complete the whole task might be to actually number the rows, pardon me, or number the boxes along there, 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, or 10 of them. But anyway, so the kids will tell me that what I have to do in the first one is draw a diagonal line right through the 2 squares, and they'll do that. And then we verbalize the second one. And I might do 2 of them together as an input, and then let's see how they would work on the other ones themselves at elaboration. And then at output, they would explain to me what strategy they used, whether they had to change their strategy or not, which of them they think was the hardest, that kind of question. They're just at output, they're telling me, they're explaining the way they approach that task. As they do the task, I will be observing their processes of way of working or whatever, and each child probably on his or her own. And then page 12, scan the whole page. And to the left of each section, you find design, find each of the drawings so that when completed, each is the same as this model. Same as page 11. And very similar, I would have thought. I'm not too sure it's much harder than the first. Maybe the second model there with the rounded shapes is harder, because maybe I have a difficulty labeling some of those shapes, but it's the same sort of strategy, same sort of problem. And similar type of strategy would be used. Any comments on that one?
With the triangle one, maybe I don't know if it's just mine, but there's a frame that is the exact same as it. So do you just then leave that the way it is?
Yeah, the first frame is correct. Find there's
Well, there's I think it's in the second row in the second column. It's just completely done already.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why do you think they've done that?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be interesting to see a child who starts correcting it?
Yeah, I suppose it would tell you that they're maybe sweeping through that without properly analyzing it.
And this is the word discrimination, I suppose, could be used here. So you're realizing that, there's nothing wrong with those ones. They're quite correct. And, good sign of the elaboration, precision and accuracy and all those things that are the elaboration phase are in operation there. Any other thoughts on those 2 pages? All right, they're doable, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right, and then unit. Right. Unit 5. 13 to 17. To integrate the complementary parts into a given hole. Now it looks like, and it is, that we've got several pages all asking us to do the same thing, but we'll anticipate that they become more complex. So page 13, we scan the page. I've got to look at the figure at the top of the page. For each drawing in the left column, there is a drawing in the right column which completes it. Write the number and the letter of the two drawings you combine to make the complete picture. So what have you to do there? Make the complete figure, sorry. So the model is presented right at the top. There's the model we're working from. Everything then flows from that. On the left-hand side, I've got parts of that model. And on the right side, I've got other parts of the same model. What do I have to do?
Figure out what each one needs in order to make the full model. So one needs E in order to become.
That's right. So the thing has been done for us. So 1, if you match it up with E, you get the model. What about 2? What would you match up with on 2?
E.
E again?
D.
Oh, B. Yes, B. Although with B,
Love a gap still.
yeah, there's not quite going to work. So it's not, because we need 2 to match up with something.
Is it
C, would it be?
C, yeah. What's confusion is there is that it's already given us 2 arms of a triangle. 1 is missing, but that is provided in C. What about number 3?
F?
F. Yeah. Okay, a lot of, transfer happening here. Number 4.
A.
A.
Mhm.
All I need is the one. I've got everything except that one wee line. Number 5.
E.
E. Yeah. No, not E.
B,
Oh,
would it
B.
be?
B. B, yes, B it is, yeah. And number 6.
D.
Yeah.
By process of elimination, by that stage, we'll have that worked out. Again, the strategy of ticking them off as you get them type of thing is a good thing. And 14, let's look at it because the reason, look at the figure. For each drawing on the left, there's a drawing on the right, which completes it. Write the number and the letter of the two drawings, which you combine to make the figure, the complete figure. Same thing, there's the model. Here's part of it on the left and the completion of it on the right, and no answer provided for any of them. So we have to work out what the answer might be. So we'll just do number 1. Number 1, what would match up to number 1?
A?
B,
A?
A.
Or C.
B.
C.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you could kind of use A, but it would be lines on top of lines, wouldn't it?
Yeah, because you've already been, it wouldn't be A. But it looks like it's going to be, the completion of it will be C. There's that wee corner there is what's missing on C. This is quite a challenge, isn't it? It
Yeah,
takes,
you have to hold quite a lot
you see,
in your memory as well.
that's the problem. You have so much to hold in your mind at the same time. Let's do the last one, number 6. What would be the conclusion to that one?
B.
B.
Yeah.
B would come. All right, look, 15. They're all very similar, up to 17. Look at the figure at the top. Look at the figure at the top. For each drawing on the left, there's a drawing on the right. which completes it, write the number and the letter of the two drawings you combine to make the complete figure. Same issue, but anything changed?
Just the shapes.
Just the shapes have changed, and they're difficult enough in the type of shapes they are, because you can't label them. And now number 16 does a bit of a change. Correct the errors. So look at the figure at the top. Each drawing on the left, when combined with the drawing on the right, will form the figure at the top. You are to correct the answers by changing the letters or numbers so that the correct combinations are listed. Okay, so we're going to assume then that you like all of these. We'll infer that all of these are wrong, and we have to sort of see which one would be correct. So number 1 and D, it said. So will I start by looking at what they gave me? And then working out why would that one not be right? So why is D incorrect?
Has lines that are already contained in one.
It would be, yeah, have the same lines drawn again. So what is the answer to what should one be?
D.
C. And it's actually much easier than it would appear to be. And at least these shapes on the left don't change orientation, So number 2, what would be the right one for number 2?
D, I think, is it?
I think it's D2, yeah. There we've got the line down and the wee circle in the middle of it. So far, we didn't do the job of describing the original model, but you would do that every time. Every one of these pages, now I know you go up to page 17 for the unit. So if 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 5 pages, you maybe be able to do 2 pages in one lesson. So it would take you a couple of lessons to do all of that unit. And 17 then, look at the figure at the top. For each drawing, there's a drawing on the right, the number and letter that combined. So all of a sudden, they've gone back to the same task. It's not correct anything, it's make the model. Okay. Just do number 1. What should number 1 be?
D.
D. Yeah, you see how to do it. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right on that one. Unit 6. To unite discrete parts into a whole. And you're working with wholes and parts all the time, but in different sort of combinations. Each section, so it's 18 to 20, each section which appears below the given design is composed of a number of parts. On the line beneath each section, write the numbers of the parts it contains. So, this is a different kind of task, isn't it? In what way is it different?
You're seeing what it has, not what it hasn't.
You're
got.
seeing, absolutely. You're seeing that the parts have an integrity of their own, if you like. So you're looking at the parts and trying to identify what they are composed of. So number 1 there would be which letters, which numbers? Up from the model.
Oh, 3 and 4.
3 and 4. And the second one would be?
2, 3, 5.
2 and 3. That would be 2 and 3, wouldn't it? Yeah, and oh yes, you're right. And 5's in as well. There, the whole of the circle is provided. 2, 3, and 5. You're right. It's unlike the first one. And then the third one would be
5.
1 and 5. And the fourth one would be
2, 4, and 5.
2, 4, and 5, or 2, 5, and 4. Yes. And the fifth one,
1, 4, 3, and 5.
1, 4, 3. And would we say we've got all of 5 in that one?
No,
Isn't
but that's not the first time when we don't.
Yeah, we don't have 5. And you see in the 2 and 3, 5 was, you got the shape of the circle. In this, you don't. And in number 4, you got the shape of the circle. There's it there. So you could say that's 5 as well. And then the last one.
You have everything?
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're going to have to put down there. Yeah, absolutely. And the second one, the same. So unite discrete parts into a whole. Okay. 19 then. Each section appears below the given design is composed of a number of parts. On the line beneath each section, write the numbers of the parts it contains. So in the model, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. We'll have to describe what we've got there because that's a more complex model design you've been given. So we've been given a big triangle and a small triangle on the left-hand side. Got a small triangle. No, we've got 3 small triangles, 3, 4, and 5. So 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are the same. And then we've got these longer shapes on the outside of 4 and 3. Right, well, we do one of these then. What is the first one?
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. Second one?
Which task is that? Sorry, I'm not following.
Page 19. The top model. So the first one was, yeah, I think it is 1, 2, and 3. That shape from the model. You see that? Are you happy enough with what we're doing, folks?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. What about the second one then? What's it?
2 and 3.
2 and 3. And the third one?
3, 4, and 6.
Yeah. We're
That's
The
a good
reason
question.
why I think that is because the next one is a smaller square, so that would just be 3 and 4, not
Yeah.
6.
okay. And not including number 6, which is alongside of it there. Okay, so
Yeah.
that could be very good. That's a very good idea. Scan the whole task. And then the fifth one?
2, 3, 4, and 5.
And will you include 6 in it this time?
Wait, which one is this one?
The fifth one down on the second row. The big red triangle.
Oh yeah, I don't think we could include 6 in that one.
No, I don't either, because you've got the full length across the bottom line and the full length along the top line. There's no idea of, so we really need 2, 3, 4, and 5 for that one. What about the sixth one?
Everything bar 6, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I agree. I don't think we'll be putting 6 into it. And then you see you've got an interesting one. Number 7.
2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
And 6, exactly. And the last one.
4 and 5.
4 and 5. It's all you have there is 4 and 5. All right. Difficult enough, do you not think? Yeah, might need to walk them through some of that. And again, bridging for looking at each part is a discrete entity on its own is the point of this one. So that the part is very important. It's not just subjected to the whole. It's very important in its own right. And page 20 then. Correct the errors. In each frame below, you'll find a drawing, which is composed of parts of the model given at the top. Under each drawing, you'll find the numbers of the parts. If the given numbers are correct, mark A plus in the small circle. If the numbers are incorrect, mark A minus in the small circle and correct the given numbers. So this is very much at a higher level because we've so many things to consider. We have to consider the model and the numbers of parts that are in it. So there would appear to be 12 parts in the model, all made up of different shapes. So we could verbalize some of them, describe some of them, but not all. And then we've also got to take account then of the fact that when we get the parts down in frame 1, we've been given 6, 7, 10, and 11 for that one. So we've decided if that's right or not. And then if it is right, we put A plus, and if it's not, we put A minus. So aren't there an awful lot of things to consider there? So special needs children, analytic perception is a very difficult instrument for some kids. You can see how it would be. So let's just look at, see, it's harder now because your model is so big to actually differentiate between all of these, but also to spot the one in the first frame there. So it says that it's 6, 7, 10, and 11. What do you think?
That's right.
That would look to be right. 6, 7, 10, and 11. Okay. What strategy are you going to have for this? I mean, is there any way of sort of seeing? Or
For me, I have like 2 strategies that I was using when I was doing the first one. So like with a pencil, you could put a little dot on 6, 7, 10, and 11, and then see, can you make out a shape? And if not, I don't know whether you're allowed to do that, but you could use something to cover the numbers that you're not using.
yeah, and see what's left. Yeah,
See,
because
does it make the shape? And if not, it's wrong.
that's right. You've got such a blast of information in the model that it makes more of a challenge for us to try and work it actually out. So what would we be putting in the wee circle then?
A plus.
A plus. All right, we'll do another one. We'll not do them all. We haven't time. But the second one, what would you say it is? It says it's 3, 8, and 11. 3, 8, and 11. 3, 8, and 11. Is it 3, 8, and 11?
No.
No.
You're not. So what is it then?
3, 4, 11, is it?
4 and 11. So we'll have to put what in the wee circle? A minus. That one was actually wrong. And my strategy has got to include looking at the numbers they gave me and then working from that to see whether it's right or not right. And the third one across, 11, 12, 8, and 9. So 11, 12, 8, and 9. 11, 12, 8, and 9.
Yeah, it looks okay.
Yeah, that's an A plus. What's confusing us there is that the 8 and 9 are not a full unit. You know, they're funny shapes. So we haven't got, so it's much harder to see. So, but we have got that skewed rectangle there.
Is this the second last one?
Is this what?
Are we on the second last one here?
Yeah, we're on the last one there in the first row, which is 11, 12.
Okay. Yes, sorry.
That one. We'll not do the rest of them, but it's just to give you a flavor of each.
Yeah. Perfect.
This uniting discrete parts into a whole. All right, let's look at the next unit. We're nearly 7 and there are only 8 units. So unit 7, pages 21 and 22. To isolate a composite that is embedded in a complex whole. To develop an awareness of the need for precision. So each figure in row A appears in the completed design beneath it in row B. Locate the figure and color it. So what makes this difficult as well is the sort of amount of stuff, the amount of parts there are in the models and on row B each time. So many parts. And then you're separating out bits of those into isolated parts and trying to find them. in the main picture, in the main model. Now, before we actually do any of that, I think you see what the problem is. What's that like? How would you bridge from that? Maybe we should,
Finding a part within a whole.
yeah. So you're finding, you're trying to isolate parts within a very complicated whole.
So if you had to draw a theme from a novel,
Yeah,
you're taking out one element or aspect of what is a big complicated thing.
or one event from the novel. I'll give you an even more prosaic one. If you're making something with your hands or you're knitting and you reach a line, you count the stitch and you realize, oh my God, there are three, I'm three short. You're going to have to go back to the whole piece of work and find out, isolate the part within the piece of work you've done where you made the mistake. Don't try that, folks. It's not, life's too short. But it's something like that. So why would I try to find isolated parts? If I'm trying to find something that why do I have to isolate the parts? First thing that strikes me is if I find there's something not quite right and I need to find out what it is that's bothering the whole thing. I need to isolate that part that's causing the difficulty. That's one reason for doing it. And then I need to fix that part. Now, in this case, we're just finding the parts, trying to find them within the big picture. But, it's really very difficult because I can't see the parts for looking at the whole. Bridge from that. What else might be like that? Or where might that be relevant? How would you bridge?
If you're learning a piece of music on an instrument and you can't get it right, but then when you go back through it and you realize that there's maybe a couple of bars within it that are causing the difficulty, so you go back and you practice those bars until they're right, and then all of a sudden you're able to play the piece.
That would be absolutely, totally excellent example. And also in mathematics, you can easily see where it would work out. Whereas I work my way through the whole thing, I've got my output, I've got my answer, and now it turns out it's not right. So I'm going to have to, and in fact, what would be even better is I work through my problem, I've got an answer, and now in order to check if the answer is right or not, I need to go back and find all the parts of the problem again, all the steps that I took, and try to work out whether my answer is valid or not. Okay, and it's the need for precision and accuracy is a very big part of this. Look at number 22, just again to move us on a little bit. Each figure in row A appears in the completed design beneath it in row B. Locate the figure and color it. It's exactly the same task, only more complex. If you could, it would be, they need to be well on with IE to do these anyway, but it would be good to do the 2 pages at the same time. Okay, you see that one? Let's just find the first one in A, first shape in A, and we haven't done the proper mediation, but can you see it in the model in B? You there?
Like, can it be in them all? No.
No, it's in number A, looks down at B.
Yeah.
You have to find that shape in A in B.
Okay. So, yeah, like I can see that shape.
Can you? So where is it exactly? Describe it for us where you see it.
So there's there's 4 colored triangles.
Yeah.
The second two colored triangles from the top.
Yep,
The one in the middle, that's white,
yep,
and the one underneath them, that's colored.
that's
So
right.
those 4 triangles would make A.
With the triangle. That's right. And what makes that all the harder is that 3 of the parts are the same, but one of the bits of the parts is different, the white one.
Hmm.
And that adds to my bit of confusion there. We'll do one more just for the crack, just to see.
Can I ask just about this one? Can we also rotate them, the figures in space, and then if we can be 2 more of them?
Yeah. Now, funny enough, I think with this one, you probably don't have to rotate. They would make it even harder if you did, because then you'd be looking, it would be really, really, really difficult. But here you're looking for what's on row A will be down there in row B somewhere. So let's look at the second one then in row A. Can you find it in row B? After a while, you get really, really quick at seeing it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Can you see it there?
Yeah.
So count and tell me what it is creates that original A pattern.
8 little triangles.
3 little triangles on the top
in the
there.
middle.
1,
Yeah.
2. Then
And then another 5 below.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 underneath it. And that makes that sort of, what is the name of that shape? Is there a name for that? See,
Yeah,
that's
there is. I just can't think of what it is.
sort of a name for it, I think, but it's hard with these because a lot of these have no name. So I have to just find them. But you see what you're supposed to do there? Yeah. You need to go through them and do them. It's great to have a partner that you can say, here, come here. I'm, could you do this with me? Because I'm not sure if I can find these parts or not. If we have time at the end, we can come back and have a look at more of these, but I want us to get an overview of the whole thing. So the last unit is pages 23 to 25. Now look at 23. Not unlike, it's the same type of thing, but in a different way. To construct a whole from identifiable parts. To learn that only certain components will make a specific whole. In each of the following outlines, this is on page 23, you are to draw the section that is composed of the parts whose numbers appear beneath the outline. Pay attention. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw. So if you're making a specific shape, okay? It's slightly different from, so in each of the following, draw the section that is composed of the parts whose numbers appear beneath the outline. So the outline is the shapes along the big box, and the shape, the model is the one in the small one on the left. We've got the children in front of you. We can point to them and show them. Pay attention. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw. So the first one. So they're all, we look across, they're all that sort of right angle triangle, which is what the model is. The model is broken up into 4 parts, all numbered. And now what I have to do is I have to create the model, recreate it, but using only 2 and 3 of the original model. So what will I draw there?
Just one line.
From
From the central dot to about 3/4 of the way up the long line on the left.
Could you see a kid? Supposing a child took that dot and drew the line right up to the apex of the triangle. What is the cognitive function there? That's an issue. So many. Wouldn't it be? Would be blurred in
Vision.
perception. Yeah. Lack of need for precision and accuracy, any of those things. And I can assure you that would be very, very likely. So he makes a mistake. So that's why we say, stop, wait, tell me where you're going to draw that first one. And then we say that, and then we draw it. What about the second one? We've got the dot only, and then it says just do 1 and 2. So what will I do there?
A straight line. The same again, 3/4 the way up the long line.
Yeah.
And 3/4 the way across on the bottom of the
Yeah.
triangle.
Yeah.
And then a line diagonally straight into the 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I have to do 1 and 2, then I'm going to do that diagonal line, but cutting through the lines, not going right to the corners or anything, and then join up my dot with a diagonal line from the dot to the left-hand corner. Hard enough to verbalize that, but you know what to do. So that's 1 and 2. And then the third one along the top, do 1 and 4. So who's going to do that one? Jordan, you do it first.
I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. So you take the line and you draw it from where to where?
From the right angle corner of the triangle to the center dot,
Okay.
and then from the center dot straight out to the right.
Yeah, straight down to somewhere along 3/4 or an inch or so in from the right hand corner. Okay.
And
And
then
then
from the center dot diagonally up, about 3/4 of the way up on the left hand side.
which one are you doing?
The third one, 1 and 4.
1 and 4, yeah. Yeah, okay. Right. So that's right. Oh, anyway, we've got the dot. So we draw a diagonal line from the dot to the left-hand corner. The right angle triangle, as you said quite correctly. We take a horizontal line and we draw it from the dot straight across to the right-hand line, to the right line, the long line. And then we take the line from the dot to about 3/4 of a way along the bottom line. It's very, very precise and accurate you need to be. It does warn you, pay attention at the top. Okay, let's see what page 24 is like. In each of the following outlines, you are to draw the section that is composed of the parts whose numbers appear beneath the outline. Once you've done the first page, you know what you're at. Pay attention. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw.
So it's just offering less structure again around it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So if we have to do 1, 2, and 3 in the first one, what will we draw? Will you be dealing with the left-hand side of the shape there, the frame there?
Now, on the right, a horizontal line,
Yeah.
the center out to halfway down the line on the right hand side.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, I think. From the center out onto the... So we've got this big rectangle, and it's been divided, there's a straight line, a vertical line right across the middle of it. And then they've made a square at the top, a triangle, and then a 4-line shape. And then we've made nearly 2 triangles in 2 and 3, although they're not quite 2 equal triangles, so they're not. In fact, one of them isn't a triangle at all, 3 isn't a triangle. So if I'm going to make 1, 2, and 3, I have to draw a line from the center, the middle, right across a horizontal line, right across to the left-hand line. And then, in actual fact, if I do that, I've created the shape without drawing the parts in between. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw. You clear about what that means?
Yeah, I was
I don't
wondering
really
about that.
No.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying I don't really understand what it means. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw. Because if we don't include the lines between the parts we draw, we can just leave the first figure as it is. Because this way it will include 1, 2, and 3. And if we are not to draw lines between 1, 2, and 3, so then it's finished.
Yeah, well, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. I think we would still need to draw the horizontal line right across from the middle across. And then you've got the two main parts left, which would be 3 and 2 and 1.
But the thing is saying do not include the lines between the parts you draw.
Yeah.
So does it mean that we have to kind of just outline the shape of what we are going to include and not to draw the lines between them?
That's exactly what it means, but you'd have to draw something there to do 1, 2, and 3. So you'd have to draw a line across the center. And then I've got, so what I might be inferred there is that I don't need to draw the line between 2 and 3.
But then why would we draw the line between 1 and 2?
Well, it's saying draw the section that is composed of the parts whose numbers appear beneath the outline.
So the section is drawn there. We don't have to do anything.
But it might be that we literally just trace over that section. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And likewise in 4 and 5, we would give the downward section the whole thing, but not the bits in the middle.
Yeah.
Would that make more sense?
Yeah, it would. I always wonder why they include these kinds of things. Because
Or
that,
maybe they're just pre-teaching the concept with the first frame.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
essentially.
they are kind of saying this is what we expect you to do. And then all of the other boxes are empty. And that's the type of the thing that we
but you see, no, the second, which is 4 and 5, well, you're just going to have to draw right down in the middle, from the top of the middle, right down to and then draw your horizontal line across, and then draw your diagonal line right down to make the 5. You're going to have to do that, though, aren't you? Although, what you could do is you could draw just that shape down from the top to the middle and then down to the right-hand corner. And
Yeah.
not draw the horizontal line between 4 and 5.
But you'd still need to then draw the outline. If you mirror what they do in the first shape,
Yeah,
You'd
just the
also-
perimeter.
the perimeter, exactly. That's a better term.
Yeah, you would.
But what are they trying to prompt the kids towards here, I suppose, is the question, if you know what I mean, when we look at this.
I think it's the same sort of thing, identifying parts within a whole and making it more and more complex as you go. 24 to 25, the same sort of thing. In each of the following, you are to draw the section that's composed of the parts whose numbers appear beneath the outline. Do not include the lines between the parts you draw.
So I think if we are not including the lines between the parts, then we shouldn't have done this in the previous one as well.
Yeah, you're right.
In
But
the
the
previous
section
test.
already done, designate the numbers of the parts they represent. Where the section already drawn, yeah, designate the numbers of the parts they represent. Okay, so do you want to try and do the first one? So we have to do 1 and 5.
Which page is this?
Page 25.
25. Okay.
So we would be drawing a kind of semicircle through the 2 dots,
Yep.
but that would connect to the outer perimeter and
Well-
then trace the outer perimeter between the 2 points that you've created.
And I imagine that because you don't have to include 2, then you don't have to draw those that wee shape up there, which is 2, and the one which is 4. You
No.
just draw your little oblongy shape and the outside circle. So complete it. Designate the numbers that they represent. Okay. What I want you to do just very quickly, I was going to do it this sort of way. Consider some examples of bridging from Unit 8, which is that last hard one. We'll just leave that for a moment. But if you would look at your manual for Unit 8 and just do a very quick sort of a scan of what it tells you to do, page 12. So we'll go back to pages 23 and 25. I always refer back to the manual because it'll always give you clarity, about anything that's ambiguous. So we've got the need for precision, okay. Level of complexity high and level of efficiency medium. All right, pages 21, 22. So page 23 and 25. Just take a second there. And my manual is page 134. To have a look at any of the notes, even for page 23. And you see that those notes on page 135, only the outline of the new figure is drawn. So to darken the outlines, the outside lines that belong to the figure we draw. Otherwise, we wouldn't know why is that necessary? We wouldn't know which is parts 2 and 3, which was part 1 and 4. That's okay. A dot has been given as a point of reference for the triangle, but not for the trapezoid on the second one. So there's no point of reference. So the second one is harder, page 23. All right. And and that's all. There's nothing much given there. Page 24 then, and 25. Have a look at page 137. There are some bridging examples given. Just says there that towards the bottom of the page that this is different from 18 to 22 because there you just had to identify the numbers of the parts that made up the question. Here we do the reverse. We construct a part from the subpart numbers provided. It's really the same thing, playing about with the parts of a whole and parts of the whole, and what difference that sort of makes. I'm sort of more interested really in the bridging from that, where and strategies and principles learned in analytic perception are relevant in. And I provided, I don't think I've put these into your notes, have I? I think I go well on then into illustrations, yeah. But here are all the areas. I mean, most of that there on the left-hand side, analytic perception, carpentry, any of those hand things, cooking, dressmaking, all that, household management, repairing the car, time ideas, timetable. You can see with time, you know, how many things have I got to do today and how much time will I actually have in order to do them before I have to cook the dinner? So therefore, how much time will I give to each of them? If you were being very analytical, you might do that. Otherwise, if you weren't, you probably would run out of time. Divide numbers into fractions, parts of an equation, words into sounds, letters, syllables, yeah, phonics and so on. Analyze a literary text, yeah. Divide a study for flower skeleton, a map, putting together ingredients for a dish or meal. So that frame is probably you've got all the context for bridging there that you might want to use. The tasks themselves aren't that hard once you get to do them and you talk it through and you've got a pencil in your hand, you can do them. But it's sort of making sure they see the point of them, what they're actually meant to be for. Okay, what do you think of that? I'll just close down for a second or two and see what your thoughts are on that, because we're going to move instantaneously to illustrations.
It's a long instrument.
Oh, very. One of the longest is analytic perception. Yeah, very long. But you know, engaging, it does engage them. You know, once they start to see, it's very, very intrinsically motivating when all of a sudden you go, yeah, I see it. Now I see it, you know. It's very good that way. Now, whether you would do it all at one go is another thing. I'm not too sure that it actually would. But do bits of it and then go back to dots. It would fit in very well with dots, you know. I remember on one of the Professor Ben Hur was looking at analytic perception, and whatever he was saying, the question was asked, would this help dyslexics? And he said it really would. Can you see how it might help someone who's got those sorts of features of dyslexia?
Would it be because you have to kind of look beyond what they're giving you?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
They are given. Dyslexic will look at a page of text and leave out the words, half of them. Put in words that aren't there at all. Or look at a word and give me a complete muddle of a word for what she thinks it is. Analytic or synthetic. So when you're reading, are you analyzing and synthesizing? When you're spelling, are you analyzing? When you're writing, creating an essay, are you analyzing, synthesizing? You really are. The idea behind the instrument would be that you're trying to strengthen or repair that skill of analyzing so that it transfers or generalizes into something like improving your reading. So I asked, would this instrument help a dyslexic? And he said it would. So I've never tried it for really the specific focus on a dyslexic, but what are your thoughts?
It might do. I mean, from what I understand, there's so many facets, multiple deficits that can underpin dyslexia. You know, if these might work for some people with that profile, but then for others might not be so effective.
And those that are specific, you know, terribly disorganized, you know, dyslexics have that feature as well. They can't get anything organized. This would be well, a lot of them, but this would be good for that as well, I think.
Yeah.
But I think if you said, I've got a couple of dyslexic kids here and I'm using it with them, that's what they do with, you know, they'll offer the program to children in 1s and 2s, and this is dyslexia. Then whenever I'm bridging from that instrument, I would have to make it go into literacy. Breaking up long words into syllables, using your phonics, your phonemic awareness to blend your sounds, and looking at how you might use that and your visual awareness as well in order to spell, to encode then, to decode and encode. And then would it help comprehension? Because dyslexic often don't have that many problems with comprehension, unless they've got difficulties learning as well. But they often comprehend quite well. But I think it would help with comprehend. What are you doing? Are you doing that when you're comprehending something?
You can certainly see it for comprehension around that ability to pull together what it all means, I
Yeah.
suppose. It's almost a bit of a synthesis piece.
Yeah, it is, because you could say, now there's something interesting I've learned there about the boy in this story on that page. There's something interesting that we haven't talked about before. What was it we were told? And it is definitely something that a lot of readers will not see. You know, they will skip over. So, for example, there's a text that I have where there's a narrator. My sister came home the other day. So there's a narrator. But then also there is a mother and a father and the daughter and the daughter's boyfriend. Okay? But the way it's told, the narrator is telling us all about the girl coming home saying she's going to get married. Her mother said you're far too young and all this sort of thing. And when you ask the question, how many people are in the story? Always you get 4. No, they don't include the narrator.
Mm.
No, so is the narrator not part of the story is what I would ask. Then they go, oh yeah, I forgot about the narrator. You know, it wasn't weren't thinking he wouldn't be part of it, it's just they never noticed him.
Mm.
Okay. Is that a deficit in ability to analyze and synthesize, or no, it's a whole lot of things really.
Mm.
It runs through an awful lot of things, analytic perception, doesn't it? It really does. But for
Reminds me about the not mathematical, but maybe a logical problem when there are 5 of you and you have to call a taxi and there is a 5-seater and 7-seater. Which
Yeah.
one do you call?
yeah,
If you call a 5-seater, the driver is not going then.
yeah, yeah.
The taxi man.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the same thing as the narrator, isn't it? It's thinking that way. I'd say there'd be loads and loads of examples of how we don't analyze properly. So
I prepare myself. I invited children to the birthday party and I counted the number of seats in the car, but I didn't include myself as a driver.
you put one of them in the boot, I suppose, did you?
Well, thankfully there were more than one cars coming, so we found a space. I couldn't believe I did it.
Yeah, that's all good bridging.
Mm.
You know. Okay. Well, let us move then with great and uncivil speed to illustrations, and I think you'll find it is a completely different kettle of fish. So, have you got your instrument there? There is your cover page, and it's page 18 of my notes. Now you can, I imagine, see the logo here. We'll come back to it actually, because you can obviously see what has happened there and what the problem might be. But illustrations, and I've got these notes here on page 13, focuses on problem solving. That's what the whole instrument is about. The illustrations are cartoons, show in a humorous way why problems occur and different ways of understanding and solving them. The cover page shows in an absurd way the problems which arise when someone does a job without thinking. I know it's silly, and it's a silly looking, problem, but the problem arose because he didn't look at what he was doing. Mind you, the guy standing there didn't do much thinking either. The man mechanically painting the wall without thinking paints over another man who also fails to think and so gets painted over. So like a twit, he stands there and doesn't consider, well, maybe I should move out of the road. So when do you do that? So that's what these are all about. Each one is a sort of different problem that arises, and we're going to just have a look at some of them. And that word anthropomorphism, it's a tool for teaching ethics and moral reasoning, the use of animal imagery. Now, I think that by around primary 3, when the children are age 7, they should be able to realize that the animals in the story represent something else. It doesn't mean that the real animal spoke, but what does the animal or the weird character figure that's in it represent? What does it actually mean? Now, at primary 3, they find that very, very hard. They still think that the monster was really a monster and that sort of thing, you know. Many humorous situations, often exaggerated, are absurd are depicted as a springboard to discussing. And we're looking at what caused the problem, what was the result of your actions, what were the solutions that were found and what should they have been, consequences to the solutions. And there are many opportunities to discuss moral and ethical behavior. So this is one of the instruments which would really very much fit with what we were talking about, linking the instrument with philosophy for children. So you can philosophize with all of these, with so many of these. Now, there are 20 pages. There is no interdependence between the pages, so they need not be taught in sequence. You can do whatever you like. And they can be divided into the following categories. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, they're there on page 13. This frame is on page 13. But I'm going to have you turn to these pages. So have a look at pages 4, 7, 8, and 14. These demonstrate the relationship interrelation between emotion and cognition, or the effect of perception on reality. Page 4 is the one about the guy carrying the case. He suddenly realizes, or he thinks it's far too heavy. He didn't before, but now he does. Page 7, where again, the same type of thing. He thought it was easy enough to lift, as you can see what it's saying. But then when he sees somebody else carrying a smaller guy than him, carrying a much heavier weight, he feels completely deflated. It's page 8. Yeah, the one about the donkeys pulling the cart and the effect on you when you see someone else, the interrelationship. And page 14 is the guy getting up in the morning to go to school. First of all, he thinks it's not a school day and he's dead happy. And then when he spots his mother giving him a school bag, he realizes, oh my God, it's a school day. And that entirely changes his perception of things. Okay. Pages 5, 9, and 10. Sorry, did you get turning the pages there in that very brief time? Page 5, 9, and 10, illustrations that depict ingenious, direct solutions to a problem. So 5, how to get across the gully, how to get across the rift in the mountain or the road or whatever. The big dog and the wee baby dogs, and they solve it by the mother carrying them across herself on her back. Page 9, the giraffe can't get through under the tunnel. It's far too big, so the man doesn't know what to do. So he goes and ties down the neck of the giraffe to the front of the wagon, and the problem is solved. 9 and page 10 is the pilot at the controls in the ship, and the problem is that every time he turns the wheel, his nose gets caught in it, but he realizes if he stands up on something higher, it won't happen, and his wee cat is delighted that he has solved the problem. Ingenious direct solutions to a problem. Now, all of these are clever, and they don't have an effect on anybody else. They directly solve the problem. Okay, there was something about Sudan last night on the thing. I think it was Afghanistan. And these families that have absolutely nothing, where the wee boys in the family have got to help in the work in the blacksmith shop. And so the wee fellas were working on the tools and banging out the steel. And they had put them into dug a hole in the ground. So the wee fellas were standing in a hole and were therefore better able to reach the bench for battering down the iron. I thought that was they needed the wee lads, the wee boys, the family, the kids to help with the work because they had no money. And that was a solution to the problem. I thought it was very like their direct solutions. Pages 3 and 6. Yeah, page 3. Illustrations that demonstrate ingenious detour or indirect solutions to a problem. So here we've got the cheese. He wants the cheese, and he can't get it. He's too short. And so he digs a hole in the ground and for the cheese to fall down, and he catches the cheese. But in the meantime, he has destroyed the table that it was on. Was there no other way? Is this selfish behavior? Is this thoughtless behavior? Would there be any other way of having sorted out his problem if he had only thought of one? And was that the right thing to do? On page 6 is the dog chasing the cat. And the dog thoughtlessly doesn't think that, what will happen when he goes up the seesaw. And the cat is delighted at the end, looks out at how he has. So his problem there was he wanted to catch the cat, but ended up creating more trouble than he might have done. That he might have done. So pages 11, 12, and 19, you sort of need to know where these are connected, because then you can do them one after the other. So these depict solutions that do not really solve the problem, but provide a laugh for us. And in number 11, there's a drip in his roof. It's fallen down on his floor, and he's not happy. And what does he do? He creates a hole in his floor and funnels the drip down onto the neighbor below. That's another example, surely, of selfish but ingenious solutions, but which have an effect. It sorted out, to some extent, it sorted out his problem, but it didn't really, because he's probably still got the leak, but at least it's going somewhere else. Page 12. Oh, yes. Not only does the young fella saw himself and, fall down and hurt himself, but he also allows the collapse of the building. So when he saws the plank of wood, the whole building, the whole edifice of scaffolding falls down, and so does he. So they don't solve the problem, but provide a laugh, but they're not really that funny if you were to do, because there's damage all around, damage in all of these to everybody. And page 19, linked to that, the same, is walking past, the flower pot falls on his head. He looks up and sees where it has come from. And what do you think actually happens to him? What's happening there? He's given off, isn't he? Your flower pot fell on top of my head and hurt me. Look at that. He's got a big bump in his head and a broken flower pot. So he starts giving off up at the window. And then what happens?
They throw a first aid box at him.
Here, help yourself then.
Yeah.
And throw him down the first aid box. Right. Well, 11, 12, and 19. I'm not too sure. You could leave some of these out. And pages 1, 2, 13, and 19, they point to a moral or emphasize the need for reflective thinking. So page 1, of course, is the elephant and the frogs, and is absolutely my favorite one. If you've met that one before, have you done any of these? Sorry, didn't ask you that. You've done the elephant and the frogs.
I
I
haven't.
think we've done up to about page 5.
Yeah. I think now, going back to them, it would be useful to know which pages are connected to each other, or which are the same, similar, So pages 1 and 2, so there's the elephant and the frogs, and then you've got the donkeys who realize, well, look, if we cooperated, it would work out better for us. One goes one, the other way, but really, that's not the best solution to our problem. So helpfulness and thoughtfulness to people. The first one is about greed, overarching ambition, as I call it. It's very like Macbeth, and he thinks he can be an elephant, and as a result of this, he destroys himself. But in the second one, with the the donkeys, they actually solve their problem by cooperating. And when does that happen? That'd be easy enough to bridge to, wouldn't it? And page 13 then. 13 is the guy trying to find the bullseye, and he never can find it. He just simply can't do it. So what he does is he just broadens or widens the area of the center. Moral or immoral he looks quite happy, pleased with himself that he's now just painted over where he did shoot the arrow, and it looks like he was able to do it. And page 19. Sorry, you're getting so many of these all at one go. But
We've
it's,
done 19.
yeah, well, it's just the well, page 19. I've got 19 in there again for that one. Yeah, it does find need for reflective thinking as well. So yeah, no bother. Page 12 then for the last one. These are absurd or humorous because of an unexpected outcome. So page 12. Yeah, we looked at it. The absurd or humorous because of an unexpected outcome. There's something so stupid about that it a lack of forethought and thinking that you're just sort of weary of looking at that one. Page 15. Yes, the musical instrument. And he's got a, why does he carry his little fiddle in a huge case like that? I don't know. To make himself look important. Or whatever. And of course, the problem is that he wears himself out carrying the big case. He's sweating in the first two, whereas really there was. And also another thing you notice is that he's carrying his music in his hand rather than putting it into the big case, where there would, of course, have been lots of room for it. And 15. Oh, sorry, 16. Oh, yes. The gunman, dog runs off. Gunman shoots something, but unexpectedly, the dog returns with something that he hadn't expected, a fish instead of a bird. And 18, last one. So absurd because of an unexpected outcome. She puts up a washing line between one house and the other, and her washing line makes the house topple over.
Mhm.
Okay, now make what you can of all of those. I've got a couple of points here. Page 1, examples. The elephant and the frogs. One of the frogs greatly admires the elephant and wants to be like him. That's right. He grows bigger and bigger until he explodes. Did he eat the elephant or did he destroy himself by overreaching through outrageous ambition? That would be the question. And where do people do that? When does that happen? It's a perfect little intro to Macbeth.
Mhm.
The Mouse and the Cheese, very like Aesop's fables. A hungry mouse and some cheese. He destroys the table. Was that clever or selfish? Does the end justify the means? Would be the moral or ethical question that you would have there. What do you think on that one when the mouse destroys the table to get the cheese? Does the end justify the means? For some people, it certainly would. You know, all he wanted was the cheese. He doesn't care at all about the table or what damage he did to get what he wants. You can see how much bridging you could do from that one. And page 11, the room with the leaky roof. The occupant diverts the drip onto his neighbour below. Is that clever or selfish? Can I care for myself only by causing others to suffer? Well, the answer to that is clearly no, because in that case there, he didn't even repair the drip. He just directed it, diverted it down onto his poor harmless neighbour. And he thought himself so clever, but really was he in the end? Okay. So,
Would you teach several pages in a lesson?
probably not. But then again, I would probably not use the whole of that instrument ever. Although if you have them for 3 years, then you certainly do find yourself getting through more of them than you thought. But I think it's very useful to see how they're linked to each other, which ones are the same, so that you could say go from pages 4 to 7 to 8 to 14 rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want to, but they weren't put together with that intention of just doing them sequentially like that. The manual is very helpful, sort of helpful, but the moral issues in it are so obvious that in a way you don't need an awful lot of support with it. But certainly with a lot of them, like the elephant and the frogs, the kids think that the elephant ate the frog and destroyed himself, or the frog ate the elephant and so destroyed himself. But you've to rise a notch above that. It's not quite that. And the man with the drip in the roof, he has a problem. He passes it on to a neighbor or to somebody else. He lets somebody else deal with the problem, and he thinks that's the problem solved. Where might that not work out terribly well for you? And especially not in the workplace or in school or at home, in your neighborhood or whatever, it wouldn't work out very well for you. Okay, so the only reason I'm saying so is because it's 25 to 3, and I don't want to take you beyond the time that we allotted to it. We spend most of the time in analytic perception and the cognitive map and cognitive functions and dysfunctions. There was an awful lot there. Okay. That's why the first time people run level 1 across the whole week. So you would start at 8:30 and you would work through till 5 every day. So there's no mercy given, none at all. But my feeling is that really that's all very well doing that. But it's when you take them away to yourself and you want to deliver them then, that's really when you learn. That's the best way of learning delivery. Okay. Anybody got a feeling about, I'm sure, I'm not even going to ask you were there any issues with any things there that you're sort of questioning. There are, I'm sure there are loads of them. But I would suggest the following, that you keep contact with me. I'll send that link for this recording to you. I'll stop recording now.